Welcome to Jerry Recaps. The story unfolds. Li Yunxiao had been in a trance all this while. Now and then, images flashed through his mind as if he had become someone else. He also went into a state of epilepsy from time to time, at times shouting, crying, and laughing. Even stranger was the fact that there was always a voice in his mind that seemed to be reciting a strange scripture. When he listened carefully, it seemed to be a cultivation technique, and his body always swayed involuntarily with the voice. The more epileptic he became, the more fragments appeared in his mind, and the more complete they became. Finally, he passed out from the torture one day. But when he woke up, all the fragments were joined together in their entirety and appeared in his mind. Li Yunxiao's eyes were as clear as the stars of eternity. He had finally awakened. Li Yunxiao! Suddenly a cold shout of rebuke rang out. A sharp noise broke through the air as Li Yunxiao looked up and saw a piece of chalk flying toward him, about to hit him in the face. He casually caught the chalk between his fingers and put it on the table. He was quite shocked as to what had transpired. I can't believe I was reborn. Li Yunxiao's eyes lit up with shock. He turned his head slightly to look out of the window at the tall statue that rose to the top of the cloud. The year 1033 of the heavenly martial calendar. I, Gu Feiyang, have been dead for 15 years? 15 years ago, Gu Feiyang, the vanquisher martial sovereign, one of the top 10 conferred martial sovereigns of the heavenly martial realm, accidentally passed away in the Tianneng Mountains, shaking the entire continent. While he was still in his thought, another voice came ringing, Li Yunxiao, you have got some nerve to sleep in my class. He turned around to look over. He looked around in the class and observed his own body. His shock further increased. He, Li Yunxiao grinned and sighed softly. I can't believe I've been born again after 15 years. I, Gu Feiyang, am back at last. Then, he looked calmly at Luo Yunxiang, the class teacher, whose face was getting cold on the podium. It was several times that Li Yunxiao's mind had wandered in the class, so she'd be surprised if he wasn't distracted. But Luo Yunxiang was obviously in a bad mood today, so she needed someone to vent her depression on. Her face darkened, and a sneer flickered around her lips. Li Yunxiao, we were talking about the crafting of weapons. Can you tell us how many methods common weapons are made with? Luo Yunxiang was teaching the basic course on crafting weapons. Although only a handful of people could become alchemists, the most basic knowledge of weapon crafting was what every warrior must know. Li Yunxiao squinted at Luo Yunxiang and thought, she has got a great body, long hair, and a pretty face. If she were to wear a red gown, silver horn boots, a blue cloak, and the frosty sorrow, I bet she would look exactly like Red Lotus Martial Sovereign. Hee, she's got a lot of potential for wearing costumes. I wonder if Red Lotus would kill me if she knew what I was thinking. Li Yunxiao's eyes seemed to flicker with a smile, and that made her shudder inexplicably. Luo Yunxiang's heart gave a jerk. It was like a tame rabbit had suddenly been spotted by a tiger. A momentary sense of powerlessness made her feel like falling into an ice cellar. What was that? The boy's eyes, was he laughing? No way. I am a great martial master of the Four Quadrants realm. How could I be distracted by the glance of a common boy? Thought Luo Yunxiang. It must be because I've been stuck in that problem lately that I'm a bit unsettled. The look of horror in her eyes flashed away, and she soon recovered from the momentary loss of composure, and repeated the question with a darkened face. Tell us, how many ways are there to craft weapons? The crafting of weapons? Ha! I'm a 9th-tier Emperor-grade alchemist of the heavenly martial continent. Who in the world but those few undying old fogies would dare to speak of the methods of weapon crafting in front of me? Li Yunxiao, who had been at the pinnacle in his previous life, disdains from answering such questions. Li Yunxiao said carelessly, there are 48 methods of crafting common weapons. Luo Yunxiang's eyes widened as she heard Li Yunxiao's words. 48? The classroom suddenly fell silent before bursting into laughter. Ha ha! This fella must be talking in his sleep. I told you so. If I had only looked at his composure, I would have thought he knew the answer. A boy from the classroom rose and spoke arrogantly. Trash, did you even read the textbook? Lord Yangdi's textbook has only 36 types. Li Yunxiao frowned as his glance fell on the textbook in front of him. Didn't I tell him there are 48 common methods? That brat turned a deaf ear to my words. He'll never have to come to my lecture again, thought Yunxiao. Yunxiao paid no mind to all the mockery. There are 36 orthodox crafting methods, he said in a calm tone. But 60 years ago, Gu Feiyang invented 12 technical crafting methods, which have been recognized by the Association of Alchemists and listed as basic crafting methods. So, there should be 48. Luo Yunxiang's eyes further widened as she spoke. What did you say? What nonsense is this brat talking about? Does he know more than Lord Yangdi? He must be afraid of being punished, so he has started talking nonsense. Precisely. How could Lord Yangdi, a student of Lord Gu Feiyang, not know how many basic crafting methods there are? The whole classroom was filled with mockery, but a sudden shout silenced everyone. Shut up! He's right. Yunxiang slapped the table, causing a gust of strong wind to spread out in all directions. Everyone felt an overbearing force come pushing at them, and their faces fell in horror. Some of the students near the podium were as pale as paper, as if on the point of coughing blood. Yunxiang stared coldly at Li Yunxiao as a hint of surprise flashed through her mind. Then, she glanced at the crowd and began to explain slowly. There have always been 36 basic crafting methods. 60 years ago, Lord Gu Feiyang, with his unparalleled talent, invented 12 additional methods, which were recognized by the Association of Alchemists. It's just that these 12 methods are completely beyond the grasp of the average person, so Lord Yangdi didn't include them when he wrote this textbook, said Luo Yunxiang. All the students were astonished and looked incredulous as they fixed their eyes on Li Yunxiao, who appeared to be perfectly calm. Even Yunxiang was surprised. It was no secret to the alchemists that there were 48 basic crafting methods, but it was very rare for an apprentice martial warrior to know this. A thought suddenly came to her mind. They say this Li Yunxiao is illiterate in martial arts. Could it be that he has a gift in the crafting of weapons, which is why he has gathered a lot of information to learn by himself? The idea set her heart racing. If she could train an alchemist, it was worth more than a warrior. Let me test him again, thought Yunxiang. Yunxiang looked up and saw that Li Yunxiao was looking at her with a hint of a smile in his eyes, which gave her a feeling as if a teacher were looking at his disciple. That made anger rise in her. With a cold grin, she said, "Don't think you can skip class just because you've learned something esoteric. Tell me why we need to add sky crystal sand when making weapons. I'll ask you this question. If you can answer that, you can skip the rest of my class and I'll pass you with a full mark. But if you can't answer that, you will stay in the tenfold gravity chamber for 6 hours," said Luo Yunxiang. It was an opportunity or a disaster for Yunxiao. But who knew? Wow, did you hear that? That's a tough question. Everybody knows that sky crystal sand needs to be added when crafting weapons, and there's no reason why. Yeah, it's like asking you why 1 + 1 = 2. Haha. It seems that Teacher Naylan is trying to embarrass Li Yunxiao. Everyone in the class again started mocking and laughing at Yunxiao loudly. They could not hold their laugh. While looking at Yunxiao, her mind wandered. Li Yunxiao answered almost thoughtlessly. In fact, the crafting of weapons does not necessarily require sky crystal sand, but it is not easy for ordinary alchemists to master the degree of fusion between materials during the refining process after quenching. So, they need to use it, which has a neutralization property, to play a moderating role. There was an eerie silence when he had finished. Everyone looked at each other because they could not understand what he was saying. But Luo Yunxiang heard it all clearly. Her pupils constricted as she blurted out, "If that is the case, the more sky crystal sand you add in the process of crafting weapons, the better. But why is it that during the melting of karmat mixed with red copper, the more sky crystal sand is added, the more likely it is to fail?" He paused for a brief moment, and when he saw the look on Yunxiang's face, the thirst for knowledge, He smiled and could not help remembering the disciples who had followed him. Because the attribute of sky crystal sand is water, it neutralizes Red Kappa's fire attribute. So, the more you add, the worse Red Kappa's ability to melt karmic gets. Oh, I see. Yunshang's eyes gleamed with excitement. So that's why. No wonder I never succeeded. What should I do? How to get rid of the influence of sky crystal sand? She kept on asking questions. This was the problem that had puzzled her for days, and she could not find a solution no matter how hard she racked her brain. That was why she had been depressed these days. Now that she had blurted out the problem in her heart, she did not look like she was testing Yunxiao, but someone who was seeking advice. Very simple. Treat sky crystal sand as an impurity, and use the refinement essence to remove it, Yunxiao said with a hint of a smile in his eyes. Yunshang exclaimed again, how could I be so stupid as to not think of such a simple solution? She began to calculate quickly in her mind. The process of crafting flashed through her head and finally came to an end. Her eyes suddenly brightened and her face glowed with a happy smile. She remembered the face when Li Yunxiao answered her questions. It felt like he disdained to answer such low-level questions. Yunshang rushed towards the entrance of the class. While leaving, she snorted coldly and said, "Class is over. Li Yunxiao, if I don't see you in the next class, I'll send you to the tenfold gravity chamber for 3 days." Everyone sucked in a cold breath as they watched Luo Yunshang kick open the classroom door and head for the alchemy hall like a gust of wind. Could it be that teacher Luo was not asking questions but taking advice from Yunxiao, a student who spoke? Upon hearing these words, the whole class went silent. Li Yunxiao also started walking out of the class and spoke loudly as to tell everyone, "From now on I won't take her class anymore." The students' eyes were wide open as they watched Li Yunxiao leave. They could not believe that the waste Yunxiao could answer all those questions. "Hey, can someone tell me what is going on?" Du Feng was the first to speak. He rose directly from his seat and went to a tall student. "Boss, what's going on?" "No way." Shang Guanqing's eyes grew wide as he cried out, "Could he, a brat who has no talent in martial arts, actually be a genius in weapon crafting? What shall we do?" Lan Fei smacked him on the head with a textbook and said sulkily, "What genius? He has just read a few more books. Becoming an alchemist requires a lot more talent than a warrior. How can he walk the path of weapon crafting when he can't even open a single chakra?" "The boss is right." The crowd echoed in agreement, their eyes sparkling with different looks. Lan Fei pushed Shang Guanqing aside with one hand and saw several other people gathering at the other end of the classroom, whispering to each other. These few students were usually close to Li Yunxiao and could be said to be the opposite force of Lan Fei and his friends. Qin Rishua's face went cold as she clenched her palm into a fist. While the classroom was in commotion, Li Yunxiao was already walking alone down the street in Tianshui's capital. He looked up at the towering statue looming ahead and strode toward it. "This is the capital of the state of Tianshui. I remember Yang Di is from here. I wonder if he's at the Association of Alchemists? All would be well if I could find him." He looked at his towering statue and realized that it must be Yang Di, who made this statue in respect for him. He was a bit emotional watching his own statue in the center of Tianshui City. Yunxiao looked up at the Association of Alchemists. Although the tower was far inferior to those he had been in, it gave him a feeling of the utmost familiarity. After his memories had awakened, his soul had begun to slowly regain its strength. The first to benefit was the strength of his divine sense. He examined his body quickly and carefully. "This body is a bit troublesome. No wonder I was regarded as not having any talent in martial arts. Many invisible meridians have dried up, so they can't accumulate strength at all. Naturally, I can't open my chakras. I have to fix this body first. It looks like I won't be able to recover my strength anytime soon," thought Yunxiao. A few words were carved on an old stone slab in front of the tower. This stone slab was rebuilt in the year 1001 of the Tianwu calendar. The year 1001? Oh right, It seems that this is the year that Yang Di was promoted to third-tier alchemist and became the president of the Tianshui branch. I wonder if he's still here. Yu Xiao had lived in the state of Tianshui for 15 years, but the branch president of the Association of Alchemists was not the kind of person he could reach. In fact, the highest level alchemist he knew was called Liang Wenyu, a second-tier alchemist. With all the knowledge he had accumulated in his 2 lives, he will be able to achieve a higher level in this life and reach the pinnacle of power. He pushed the door open and walked in. The spacious hall inside was much larger than it looked from the outside. The noisy crowd made the interior of the tower extremely lively, which gave him a feeling as if he had suddenly stepped into a bustling market from a quiet countryside. Welcome to the Association of Alchemists. A melodious voice came into his ears, and then he saw a beautiful woman in a fashionable dress smiling sweetly at him. What can I do for you, my dear little sir? Yu Xiao smiled faintly and said, Little sir? The waitress, whose name was Lu Yao, smiled sweetly and said, You are the youngest guest I have ever received. May I help you? Although she had a beautiful smile on her face, she was paying extra attention to Yu Xiao on the inside. I'm looking for Yang Di. Is he here? Yu Xiao asked faintly, his eyes still wandering about the hall. Lord Yang Di? Lu Yao almost bit her tongue. She stared at the young man for a moment. Although she felt ridiculous, Yun Xiao's indifference made her feel that he was indeed sincere. It made her a little confused. You mean the former president, Lord Yang Di? She asked carefully. Yu Xiao frowned slightly and said disappointingly, Former president. So, he's gone? A flash of reverence instantly rose into Lu Yao's eyes. She put her palms in front of her chest. Her cheeks flushed as she said with a look of longing, Lord Yang Di had made a breakthrough and become a 4th-tier alchemist 20 years ago, so he was transferred to the headquarters of the Alchemists Association. Without Yang Di's help, it would be more difficult for him to open up the dried-up invisible meridians. His present body was 15 years old and had missed the best time for cultivation, so he could not afford to delay any longer. His previous life, Gu Feiyang, was revered as the genius of both martial arts and alchemy on the heavenly martial continent. He was not only a 9th-tier sovereign-grade alchemist, one of the 7 elders of the Alchemists Association, but his achievements in martial arts also stood at the pinnacle of the 9 heavens realm. His current body was already 15 years old, and it would be impossible for him to regain Gu Feiyang's peak strength if he delayed any longer, let alone take it one step further. I have a list of herbs here. Can you help me find them? I need 10 batches of all the herbs. Yu Xiao quickly took a pen and paper and wrote down a list of herbs. Now that Yang Di was gone, he would have to find a way to heal his internal injury. He could not afford to delay practicing martial arts even for a moment. Lu Yao, what are you doing? A voice came from behind. At that very moment, a man in a black robe came over. His robe was typical of an alchemist, and he had a curved badge hung over his shoulder, with a bright, glaring blood-red mark streaked across its surface. Lu Yao turned around and glanced over the red alchemist's badge. Then, she said respectfully after a moment of awe, Lord Jiarong, this little sir has made a list and asked me to help him collect the materials. Jiarong took the list and glanced at it. Let me check the list. A moment later, he frowned slightly, then crumpled it up like a scrap of paper and threw it away. Next, he said to Lu Yao, What nonsense is this? Lord Liang is looking for you. Yun Xiao's face darkened. In his previous life, the prescriptions he wrote were priceless, and any one of them could be sold for a high price. And yet, it was thrown away like a scrap of paper now. Lu Yao was startled when she heard that Liang Wenyu was looking for her. Not daring to delay, she said hastily, I'll go now. She hurried away without saying another word and suddenly was relieved. Jiarong turned around to leave and said, This is not the place for kids, get out of here. Li Yunxiao immediately said in a chilly voice, You are Jiarong? It hasn't been 7 days since you were promoted to a 1st-tier alchemist, right? Jiarong paused slightly, and an angry look flashed across his face. How dare a brat to call me by my name? Even the dignitaries of the capital would call me my lord when they see me. Jiarong looked down at him and said proudly, I just got promoted to a first-tier alchemist 5 days ago. That's what everybody knows. Are you sure you really got promoted to a first-tier alchemist? Yunxiao said meaningfully. Jiarong's body trembled slightly as a hint of shock flickered in his eyes. What do you mean? He turned around and asked in a deep voice. Yunxiao glanced at his right hand, which was out of his black robe, and began to explain with a smile in his eyes. Your fingers have taken on a dark gray hue and are showing signs of peeling, apparently because you've been exposed to Hell Wind Stone recently. Moreover, you emit a faint smell of blood flame orchid, which I reckon you've used to offset the after effect of the stone. Although the Hell Wind Stone has a very strong fusion property, its side effects cannot be ignored. It's something common alchemists wouldn't dare to use. Judging from the degree of damage to your fingers and the smell of blood flame orchid, it must have happened in the last 7 days. And you also have a faint odor, which is the unique smell of tiger sulfur stone. That tells me you've been exposed to a lot of it lately. It is clear, then, that your alchemist examination was to forge a weapon with tiger sulfur stone as the main material. Jiarong was completely struck dumb as beads of cold sweat trickled down his forehead. Suddenly, he burst into a rage and shouted, What nonsense! When he had finished, he turned and left. Yunxiao smiled and sighed, Well, if Hell Wind Stone is so useful, then anyone can be an alchemist. Besides, the side effects of blood flame orchid are no less severe than those of the Hell Wind Stone. I'm sure you feel extremely uncomfortable at the acupoints near your forehead, the back of your neck, and your back at noon every day, right? Jiarong's body twitched as if he were electrocuted, and he could no longer take another step as if his feet were filled with 1,000,000 tons of cement. Yunxiao shook his head with a sad look on his face. What a pity for a talented alchemist. If you want to save your life, you'll have to chop off your right hand and destroy your dantian. You stop scaremongering. Jiarong began to shake violently. Forget it then. I was going to teach you a solution. Yunxiao threw up his hands helplessly and turned to leave. You have a solution. Jiarong sprung to his feet as if he had been electrocuted, then lunged at Yunxiao and stopped him from leaving as he cried out, Tell me now. He instantly backed off and took his hands off Yunxiao. He could feel Yunxiao staring like a dragon looking at his prey. His eyes twitched as he thought, how could a teenager have such a gaze? He had enjoyed the honor of the status, as well as the awe and envy of others, which made him cling to his present status of an alchemist even more. But now he has to bend in front of a teenager. Please tell me how to solve it. I beg you. Jiarong grabbed Yunxiao by the shoulder with his left hand, shivering and almost crying. There were still a lot of people coming and going in the hall, and they all looked at them in amazement. Although they could not hear their conversation in the distance, Jiarong's exaggerated behavior and his crying face still managed to attract many glances, causing the crowd to speculate about the young man's identity. Yunxiao spread his hands and said in a feigned surprise, Hey, where's my list of materials? Where's it? Have you seen it? Jiarong was stunned for a moment, and immediately turned his head to the scrap of paper he had crumpled up. Of course, he understood what Yunxiao meant, so he hurriedly said, There it is. Please wait a moment, I'll get it for you. Ignoring the startled glances, he trotted over and bent down to pick up the paper. All kinds of astonishing remarks came drifting into his ears. Yunxiao took the paper carelessly and blew his nose on it a few times. He then crumpled it into a ball and threw it away. I want 10 batches of every item on the list, and when you've got them all, come to see me at Jialan Academy. My name is Li Yunxiao. You. Jiarong felt a cramp in his stomach and a shiver of anger as he looked at the crumpled list on the ground in the distance, with slimy snot on it. Yunxiao stared at him with a sneer. Respect is not given by others, you have to earn it yourself. And you had lost my respect right from the beginning. A killing intent flashed across Yunxiao's face as his soft voice rang in Jiarong's ears. You better not hold a grudge against me. Few people who were unkind to me still live in this world. I don't want you to get your life back only to lose it later on. By the way, your right hand will probably last only 3 more days. If you don't find the things I want in 3 days, it will be completely dead. Unless you can find yourself a 9th-tier alchemy sovereign, you will never be able to craft again in your life. Yunxiao's voice was soft, but it filled Jiarong with fright, making him shiver violently. He mustered his courage and asked almost hysterically, 3 days. I haven't even heard of most of these ingredients. And how do I know you're not lying to me? With a faint smile, Yunxiao said, You are a clever man, and I'm sure you'll find a way. Concoct a potion with the leaves of white crescent bamboos and gray world ginseng, and consume it every morning, noon, and evening. It can alleviate the pain of your 3 acupoints, and also allow your right hand to live for 2 more days. But only 2 days. If you still can't gather enough ingredients in 5 days, you don't have to come to me. Good luck. He made his way toward the snot-stained piece of paper, ashamed and resentful. The surrounding crowd lowered their heads because they all felt the anger and murderous intent emanating from his body. Some were so frightened that they scattered about, not daring to look at him again. He is but an ordinary lad, either a warrior nor an alchemist. Yet why have I felt a shivering fear before him? Jiarong was immediately ashamed and indignant as he growled inwardly. I'll let you run wild for a few more days. When I get the solution, I will certainly tear you to pieces. Jialan Academy, Li Yunxiao. Inside a luxurious office on the 3rd floor of the Alchemist Tower. Here are the 10 caddies of spirit crane roots and white phoenix dragon lotus that Prime Minister Lan Hong requested. They are very precious. Take them immediately to the Prime Minister's estate and hand them over to him personally, Liang Wenyu cautiously told Lu Yao. Spirit crane roots? White phoenix dragon lotus. Lu Yao froze for a moment and murmured, So these 2 things do exist? What's the matter? What are you muttering about? Liang Wenyu asked, frowning. Lu Yao hurriedly came back to her senses. I beg your pardon, Lord Liang. I was distracted. Just now, a teenager gave me a list of materials and asked me to find them for him, but I didn't know any of the things. I thought he was just messing around with me. Among them were spirit crane roots and white phoenix dragon lotus. Liang Wenyu was lost in thought momentarily. These 2 herbs are used to improve the strength of warriors. Where is the list now? I gave it to Lord Jiarong when he asked me to come up here, and he had returned it to the teenager, Lu Yao replied carefully. Liang Wenyu was slightly disappointed. Do you remember what else was on the list? Lu Yao tried her best to recall. Ink feather ghost flower, nether fruit, vacuum nectar, Shiva flower, fairy bud. As she read out the materials on the list one by one, Liang Wenyu's expression changed from doubtful to surprised, then shocked, and finally blank. There are a few more, but I can't remember them, Lu Yao's beautiful eyebrows knitted together. After all, she only had a quick glance at the list, and it was amazing that she could remember so many of them. Liang Wenyu came back to his senses, then hurriedly took out a piece of paper and wrote down all the materials. Did the teenager leave his name or contact information? Lu Yao shook her head, her heart filled with shock. Who is this teenager? Why did Lord Liang pay so much attention to him? Lu Yao thought. Lord Liang, she asked cautiously, I've been working in the Alchemist Association for more than 3 years, but why haven't I ever heard of these things? Looking at the incomplete list, Liang Wenyu sighed. There are several herbs in the list that I have never heard of, but when they are put together, they give me the impression that they will make a very powerful potion, which is of great benefit to warriors who want to improve their cultivation base. Even Lord Liang has never heard of them. Lu Yao spoke. Lu Yao covered her red lips with her hand in surprise, a look of disbelief in her eyes. Lord Liang, is it possible that this list is full of nonsense? Liang Wenyu shook his head and said, No, the combination of some of the herbs is so mysterious that I can't figure out the relationship between them in a short time. If the teenager comes again next time, make sure you find a way to keep him and let me know as quickly as possible. Yes, Lord Liang. With shock and uneasiness, Lu Yao took the storage bag and left. Those materials are relatively difficult for Jiarong to find. I can't count on him completely. I have to find another way, Yunxiao thought to himself as he walked down the street alone. Looking at the storage ring in his hand, he sent a wisp of divine sense into it. The inside was full of all sorts of things. What's all this jumble? Even an aphrodisiac? Oh, I remember now. I had secretly bought it last time but never got a chance to use it. Then he saw a heavy sword inside the storage ring. He threw away a small bottle and took out a large black sword, slightly surprised by its weight. This is the only useful thing, he said to himself with a bitter smile. It weighs 32 caddies and 7 taels. I can hardly lift it. How I miss my sword, Star's Slayer. I wonder where it is now. Well, I'll use it before I open up all 7 chakras. Yunxiao carried the heavy sword on his shoulder and started down the street toward Jialan Academy. When I've condensed my primordial qi, I will craft a weapon for myself. By the time he arrived at the academy, he was already panting from exhaustion. 2 figures suddenly appeared in front of Yunxiao as he entered the academy. One of the figures charged at Yunxiao and tried to grab his neck. But luckily, Yunxiao dodged the attack. Both of them backed away together. Yunxiao tightened his grip over the large sword he brought out from the storage ring. It was Dufeng and Luo Jie. They both studied together with Yunxiao in the same class. They had been bullying him for quite a long time. Dufeng stared at Yunxiao with a grim smile and said, Li Yunxiao, you are drawing quite the attention today. Yunxiao stared at them. Just as he was about to speak, 2 other boys interrupted. Monkey Chin, Fatty Han, why are you greeting me at the gate? At the front gate of the academy, Chen Jin and Han Bai, who were close to him, were pacing anxiously in circles. Where have you been, young Master Yun? Chen Jin cried out at the sight of Yunxiao. We looked everywhere for you but couldn't find you. Skinny Chen, what are you trying to do? A loud shout rang out suddenly, and then Dufeng dashed out from behind Chen Jin, staring at him with a grim smile as he said, Don't tell me that you want to oppose Boss Lan. Dufeng threw himself at Fatty Han, using his 5 fingers to form a technique eagle's claw. He strode forward. Han Bai, who was watching from one side, could not stand it anymore. He shouted at Dufeng. He strode forward and struck Dufeng's eagle claw with a punch. Both of them were apprentice warriors who had opened 4 chakras, so they were equal in strength. As a result, their bodies jolted when their attacks collided and backed off at the same time. Don't you dare attack again, Fatty Han. Skinny Chin caught Fatty Han avoiding his fall. He was shocked to know that Han Bei already opened 4 chakras. A man appeared beside Dufeng. It was Luo Jie, he said proudly. I, Luo Jie, had just opened 5 chakras last week, and I was worried that I didn't have anyone to practice with. Luo Jie dashed towards Fatty Han. Well, Fatty Chin, I'll use you as my target now and see how wide the gap between someone who has opened 4 and 5 chakras is, said Luo Jie. Both of their fists collided, releasing huge energy in the vicinity. Fatty Han, arm broke due to the huge power of Luo Jie's fist, and he flew backwards, colliding into Skinny Chin. Fatty Han cried out in agony due to the pain of his broken arm. Ha ha! The gap is that you can knock out all his teeth with just 1 punch. Luo Jie laughed. At the moment, many students had gathered around the gate, all wanting to watch how the scene would play out. They were all gesticulating and discussing among themselves. Dufeng pointed at Chen and Han and said, I'll give you 3 minutes to get out of here. The faces of Chen and Han turned livid with rage. Suddenly, from behind them came Qing Rishua's icy voice. I'd like to see how you make us get out of here. She went on angrily, I'm going to tell Yunxiao that he must attend Teacher Luo's next class session. What can you do to me? Yunxiao was quite disappointed by all the memories of his second life, being a waste, ridiculed, and a trash son of a noble family. This was all that people talked about him. But now, watching the princess of dynasty standing up for him, he was relieved. Du Feng and Luo Jie's faces flickered as they could not afford to offend the princess. Pointing at the few people, Du Feng snapped, "Skinny Chin, Fatty Han, and your piece of junk, count yourself lucky this time. Let's go." He waved a hand and was about to leave with Luo Jie. "I thought it was something big. Why do you have to make it so mysterious?" Yun Xiao touched his nose. Even if Teacher Luo did not punish him, he had planned to practice in the gravity chamber himself. "Why do you want to leave just like that after kicking up the fuss?" Du Feng stopped, his pupils slightly dilated. "What? Do your pieces of trash have a problem?" Yun Xiao walked up to the front dragging his great sword. He laid his hand on the hilt of the heavy sword and said, "I don't have a problem, but I just want to see how big a gap there is between someone who has 5 chakras opened and someone who has none." Du Feng, Ruxue, and the others were stunned, and then Ruxue blurted out, "Yun Xiao, you." "Ha ha. Interesting." Du Feng interrupted Ruxue with a laugh. "Since you want to die, I don't mind fulfilling your wish." He shrugged his shoulders while speaking as though he did not care about any provocations. As soon as he had finished speaking, he activated 4 chakras kicked into the ground, and launched himself out, laughing and throwing a punch at Yun Xiao's head. "How dare this punk make such a big statement? Watch out!" Qinjin and the other 2 cried out. It was too late for them to save Yun Xiao. Ruxue was so frightened that she covered her mouth with her hands and turned pale. Yun Xiao was just an ordinary man. How could he withstand a punch from an apprentice warrior who had opened 4 chakras? Everyone heard a dull thump as Du Feng's body suddenly froze in front of Yun Xiao. His fist had been thrown out, and was pressing against Yun Xiao's temple. However, Yun Xiao's face was cool as ever, without the slightest hint of pain. A shrill wail of pain resounded through the air, almost piercing the eardrums of those who heard it. The palpitating scream was enough to make everyone imagine how much pain the owner of the voice had endured. What caused everyone's expression to change was that the voice came from Du Feng's mouth. As he had his back facing the crowd, no one knew what had happened. All they saw was that his body began to tremble violently, and then slowly fell back toward the ground. Du Feng finally fell to the ground, his trembling hands covering his crotch as his body twitched wildly. Meanwhile, he continued to wail and scream like a pig in a slaughterhouse. It was then that everyone saw Yun Xiao slowly lower his right leg. It turned out that he had kicked Du Feng in the most vulnerable spot. "Li Yun Xiao! You are too vicious! How can you use such a sinister tactic against your classmate?" Luo Jie's pupils constricted as he discovered in an instant that Du Feng's fist had not struck Yun Xiao in the face, but was half a centimeter away. Looking at the shock and fear in everyone's eyes, Yun Xiao spread out his hands helplessly and said with an innocent expression, "You all saw him rush up to beat me. I did nothing but just lift my right knee. I didn't expect he would run himself into it. What bad luck." Everyone present had the same thought in mind. Yeah, that guy ran into the knee all by himself. What a weirdo, trying to beat someone but ending up ruining his manhood. It is truly unheard of. All the male students present shivered and subconsciously put their hands in front of their crotches. Luo Jie cracked his fists in fury. "You can't be so shameless." Luo Jie was so angry that he did not know what to say. What happened did seem as Yun Xiao had said, and even he could not see anything wrong with it. But how could there be such a strange thing? "Whatever your excuse is, you can't get away with it," Luo Jie said angrily. He opened his 5 chakras. A surge of energy rushed out from his body. "I think he has just opened the 5th chakra. He is actually an advanced martial apprentice. But that's enough to give that lad a hard time." The students in the vicinity started mumbling. Even Yun Xiao's friends and Princess Ruxue were dumbfounded upon witnessing the 5 chakras of Lu Jie. "Today, I'm going to destroy your manhood and cripple your limbs. I will avenge Du Feng," said Luo Jie. Then his figure flashed as he dashed forward. However, he seemed to be somewhat afraid, as he did not attack from the front like Du Feng did, but turned to the side and threw his fist out. The punch whistled through the air with a force of over 1,000 catties. Yun Xiao, get out of the way! Rushua cried out in panic, running toward Yun Xiao for the rescue. Fatty Han and Skinny Chin also ran towards him. Yun Xiao clasped the hilt of the black iron sword sticking in the ground and lifted it in front of him, with the tip pointing straight at Luo Jie. But the sword was so heavy for him that he looked laborious and unsteady, as if a gust of wind would knock him over. Luo Jie sensed the danger but was horrified to discover that the sword, although seeming slow, had covered all his weaknesses and escape routes. It was as if he had revealed all his weaknesses and was lying on the chopping board, waiting to be slaughtered. A rumble rang out as the two of them clashed with each other. A gust of wind flew out. Yun Xiao stood there without moving an inch. Fatty Han and Skinny Chin halted completely in the middle of their attack. All of them were struck dumb. What happened? By now, even a fool would know that something was wrong. When the dust disappeared, what they witnessed was Luo Jie's fist that landed straight on the blade, right at the sharp edge. Luo Jie tried to bear the pain, but it was too late. A shrill scream echoed through the air, and everyone present saw Luo Jie covering his right fist with his left hand as blood dripped down. An excruciating pain washed him over from his right hand, and what frightened him even more was that his fingers seemed to have snapped under the blow. You tried to kill me? Let me destroy your manhood. Yun Xiao struck Luo Jie in the crotch, producing a loud thump that made all the male students present shudder uncontrollably, their bodies turning cold. Both Du Feng and Luo Jie are lying down on the floor holding their sensitive parts and agonizing in pain. The onlookers were all discussing in amazement. They were naturally unable to see through the mystery behind the entire scenario with their eyes. Although Yun Xiao had lost all his strength, he still had the discerning eyes of a martial sovereign who once stood at the pinnacle of the Nine Heavens realm. He had simply timed Luo Jie's punch early enough to put the sword tip in front of his fist when he could no longer change course. What's going on? Does he think that he can use his flesh against the sword just because he is a warrior with primordial chi? How could there be such a fool in the world? I think there's something wrong with that lad with the sword. The onlookers started murmuring amongst themselves. Yun Xiao was also exhausted after handling the heavy sword due to his frail body. He stood there taking support from the sword and wondered, if I can't even get rid of a few apprentice warriors, I might as well kill myself. He snorted coldly as he carried the heavy sword on his shoulder and strode toward Luo Jie. Since you dare to attack my friends, I'll cripple both your fists. Luo Jie tried to beg and stop Yun Xiao, but it was too late for forgiveness. Du Feng was also laying close to Luo Jie, holding their sensitive parts. They both were crying and agonizing in pain. Yun Xiao first crippled Luo Jie's fists, and then kicked both of them. The kick sent both of them flying into a wall. They crashed into the wall, colliding with each other, and they fainted. I don't know. I think we should just leave them alone and get out of here. This lad is too ruthless. We better go now, lest we get ourselves into trouble. Let's go. The students who had been enjoying the fight ran away as they saw this whole scene. Young Master Yun, could it be that your meridians have been unclogged and your chakras have been opened? Qinjin said, exulted. Yun Xiao shook his head and sighed. It's not that easy. Qinjin was somewhat confused. He pointed to the two unconscious guys on the ground and asked, so what's going on? Knowing that he could not explain it to them, Yun Xiao laughed and said, didn't you see that they ran into me all by themselves? Qinjin was speechless. They ran into you all by themselves, yes? But this is so. Li Yun Xiao, are you really Li Yun Xiao? It was only then that Rishue came to her senses, looking at the scene with disbelief. Yun Xiao interrupted him with a wave of his hand. Well, you'll find out in the future. I'm going back to my dormitory. When the academy investigates this matter, there are many people here who can testify for me. Once he had finished, he carried the great sword on his shoulder and started moving toward the dormitory. Yun Xiao, even if we testify for you, the fact that you've crippled them with your sword will probably bring you great trouble. Rushua cried out suddenly. The Du family and Luo family have always been at odds with your family, and I'm afraid they'll take advantage of this incident. Yunxiao's body gave a slight pause, then he laughed and said without turning his head if they tried to stir up trouble. He then struck his giant sword down between the legs of Luo Jie and further said, "I'll destroy their manhoods as well, one by one." Rishua's face flushed as she stamped her feet angrily. This Li Yunxiao is so vulgar. And why did he suddenly change so much? He has caused so much trouble, and yet he still seems as if nothing has happened. He is ticking me off. Du Feng and Luo Jie are indeed from the Du family and the Luo family, but they are not core descendants, Han Bai said thoughtfully. With young Master Yun's status, it's no big deal to cripple them. I don't believe their families would dare to seek justice from the Li family. I just worry that they'll go after young Master Yun directly. If that is the case, he'll be in great danger. Chen Jin snorted. They wouldn't dare to be so arrogant in the academy. Sending someone to kill a student in the academy would just make them die faster than offending the Li family. Outsiders certainly wouldn't dare to kill someone in the academy, Han Bai said while frowning. But if it is other students, the academy would just turn a blind eye. Ru Xue's face flickered. Do you mean Lan Fei? Han Bai nodded with a serious expression. Everybody knows that Du Feng is Lan Fei's man, and Lan Fei has opened his seventh chakra, and is on the verge of condensing primordial qi and breaking into the warrior realm. Ru Xue and Chen Jin's faces grew grave. Warriors and apprentice warriors were two completely different concepts, not to mention the fact that Yunxiao was not even an apprentice warrior. The three of them discussed for a while, but they could not come up with a solution. In the end, they left the place while sighing. The Li family held great power in the military of Tianshui State. Therefore, although Yunxiao had long been abandoned by his family due to his physique, he still had a separate dormitory in the academy, which came with a separate cultivating room. Yunxiao entered his dormitory and thought, this body is quite weak. I must somehow strengthen it even though my meridians are clogged. He casually dropped the black iron sword on the ground. Then he began to swing his arms and press his legs, performing all kinds of poses to exercise his bones and muscles. The heavenly martial world once held a martial arts conference, where the 10 strongest martial artists were given titles. They are called the top 10 martial sovereigns, the pinnacle of martial power in the heavenly martial world. The tyrant martial sovereign was recognized as the strongest of the 10 conferred martial sovereigns. Yunxiao had obtained the body tempering technique from tyrant by chance. He never dared to let anyone know about it, and had intended to practice it secretly. But who knew that he would die in the Tiandang Mountains before he could even begin? He is determined to reach greater heights in this life compared to his past. This body is too weak. I must make it strong as soon as possible. The tyrant body tempering technique is the strongest body tempering technique in the world. It was too late in my previous life when I got it, and I died before I had time to cultivate it. Well, now is the perfect time to start cultivating it, thought Yunxiao. He let out a deep cry as he squatted down on the spot while his body slowly bent forward. Then, his upper body suddenly arched backward, his hands touching the back of his legs and forming a circle as a strange aura spread from him. A terrible pain rose into his head from his waist, as if a sharp knife was cutting his body apart. Yunxiao could no longer endure the pain. His face turned pale as his whole body went out of control. His upper body bounced back instantly, and he lost his balance, stumbling before he fell straight to the ground. It was too painful to practice this technique. He lifted his face and breathed heavily. He wondered, why is this cultivation technique so abnormal? I feel like my whole body is about to be torn apart. No wonder that tyrant is so strong, it's so painful just to get started. With this technique, even if I can't open up any chakras, it will be enough for me to cultivate to the martial sovereign level. With determination to reach the peak, he decided to practice again. Yunxiao took a deep breath as he let out a deep cry and bent his upper body back once again. Every individual who had cultivated to the peak of the 9 heavens realm had an amazing perseverance. Although talent was important, what was more important was the courage and determination to never give up. Yunxiao shouted as he bent over again for practice, the first style of the tyrant body tempering technique, moon and sun. He again bent his body into a circle. The tremendous pulling force made him feel as if his body was being torn apart by horses while every inch of his muscle and bone began to break. This time, he held on for 5 seconds, before being thrown out and slammed straight into the wall. His insides were so shaken that his blood boiled violently, causing him to cough up a mouthful of blood. The 2 setbacks had made his inner pride soar. If that tyrant can cultivate it, I'm going to do it better than him. Although Tyrant's strength was recognized as the strongest among the 10 conferred martial sovereigns, none of them were willing to admit inferiority to the others. They were all proud individuals who looked down on every being in the world. Again, he gave a loud shout. The moon and sun style. Yunxiao's cries could be heard even outside his dormitory. Despite the bone-breaking pain, he kept on practicing the technique for a whole day. A day later, in the gravity-cultivating hall of the academy, many teleportation arrays were inscribed on the ground paved with bluestone bricks, each leading to a different gravity zone. Students could be transferred directly to their destinations by placing a primordial stone in the array. These arrays were scattered across several acres of land, and only the capital of a state had the strength to construct such a cultivating venue. In the center of the dozens of arrays was a tall, thousands of meters squared platform. It was the return point of all the gravity regions. Yunxiao looked at the students and their youthful faces as they came and went, his thoughts drifting back to decades ago. At that time, he was just an ordinary apprentice warrior. Like all the students here, he listened to the legends of the heroes and worked hard day and night to advance forward on the road of the strongest. Most of the students who came here voluntarily were the children of poor families. They only hoped that they could become the warriors of the state one day, rise above the crowd, and bring glory to their ancestors. Everyone was transferred out in high spirits, and then returned like frozen eggplants, dispirited and discouraged. Everyone was self-absorbed, and few people talked. Occasionally, they all looked surprised when they saw Yunxiao dressed in splendid clothes. Upon meeting their eyes with Yunxiao, they instantly turned their faces away, in fear of the noble families or respect. Yunxiao decided to go to tenfold gravity training to practice the tyrant body tempering method. Yunxiao stepped into the yellow array marked with the words tenfold, and put a primordial stone in it. Immediately, a blue light rose from the array and wrapped him up. Soon, his figure faded away and disappeared from the hall. In the next moment, just as he arrived at his destination, he felt a tremendous tearing force coming from the ground. His whole body collapsed in a flash. All his flesh and blood were squeezed together. Yunxiao gasped for breath. He was mentally prepared, but because of the severe lack of blood in his upper body, he became unusually pale and his whole body was deformed slightly. He forced himself upright and looked around. The entire tenfold gravity region was even larger than the gravity training hall, divided into many cultivating chambers numbered from 001 to 200. As there were tens of thousands of students in Jialan College, 200 cultivating chambers were not that many. There were a lot of students who did not have a chamber at the moment, and were meditating in the public area while waiting instead. Yunxiao quickly swept the surroundings with his divine sense, and then walked towards chamber 013 while panting. Every step he took required almost all of his strength, and the pores of his entire body opened and closed dramatically under the pull of gravity, while he breathed spontaneously. I have to master the moon and sun style as soon as possible so that this body can endure the use of the medicine to break through my meridians. It took him more than half a minute to move to chamber 013. Just as he was arriving, the door suddenly opened. A pale, sweaty student came out of the chamber. As soon as he saw Yunxiao, the student was slightly stunned, and immediately lowered his head and walked in the direction of the teleportation array. It is not easy to have a vacant chamber. Why was it taken by this guy? Everybody present in the gravity hall was stunned by this coincidence. We've been waiting for most of the day for one to come out. Why was this new guy so lucky? Yeah, he seemed to know that the student in 013 was coming out. Who is this guy? Why can't I feel any primordial chi fluctuation emanating from him? The students waiting in the lobby started murmuring and giving remarks on Yun Xiao. Yun Xiao ignored all of their remarks and walked straight toward the training chamber. Just as Yun Xiao was about to step into Chamber 013, a hand suddenly reached over and stopped him. A student, smiling and dressed in a white robe, stood in front of him. My name is Yu Hujing, and I am an intermediate student who has opened 7 chakras, a peak-level apprentice warrior. You're new here, aren't you, little brother? Give me this chamber. There were 4 grades of students in the college, namely the junior class, the intermediate class, the advanced class, and the graduate class. Yun Xiao looked up and said coldly, Who are you? Get out of my sight. Hujing's face flickered, but he seemed to have thought of something after a fit of rage. He glanced behind him quietly as he regained his composure and said, You must be new here. Give me a face today. If you need any help in the college, just mention my name. Mention what? Are you going to move now or what? Yun Xiao did not bother to even listen to him and spoke with a demeanor. Hujing's face finally turned livid, even turning a little black. No one had ever dared to refuse him in such a way. He laughed out of fury and said, Haha. You have guts. How dare you, a loser who doesn't even have primordial chi fluctuation, talk to me like that? Well, I will teach you some rules that a freshman should follow today. As his voice faded away, the aura of his body suddenly soared, forming a faint pressure that blasted toward Yun Xiao. As he released his aura, all the students shifted their focus towards both of them. Primordial chi? Has Yu Hujing condensed primordial chi and broken through to the origin realm? A cry of surprise sounded in the public area and immediately attracted all eyes. Everyone's face was full of wonder. I don't think so. He should still be an apprentice warrior. If he broke through to the warrior realm, his body should have the glow of primordial chi and not just the pressure. I'm in a good mood today, kid, so I'll just break all your ribs and spare your life. As he listened to the shocked conversation around him, Hujing felt a surge of pride. He wanted to show off his might, especially now that the goddess he wanted to woo was standing behind him. A force began to build up in his fist. He threw his fist out, his arm crackling as if beans were being roasted inside. A mighty gust of wind spread out from the punch as it flew toward Yun Xiao like a savage tiger. Tiger punch? Not bad. However, this technique is not only about the momentum of a savage tiger but also about the timing to land a fatal blow. You have the form but lack the essence. Just as everyone broke into a cold sweat for Yun Xiao, he started commenting on Hujing's attack like a teacher guiding a student. Has this kid lost his mind? How could he still have the mood to mock in the face of a punch thrown out by a peak-level apprentice warrior who has opened 7 chakras? A student said as his eyes grew wide. I don't think he's mocking me. Although he's somewhat arrogant, he's got a point, said another student thoughtfully. A student next to them shook his head and said, Whether he's got a point or not, how can he dodge a punch from a peak-level apprentice warrior? Unless he has the strength of a warrior, he's going to suffer. Hujing was so angry that he could not help adding more strength to his fist. Initially, he only wanted to wound Yun Xiao, but he was determined to cripple this posturing brat with the punch now. His hands were about to reach Yun Xiao, just then. Yun Xiao turned around in an instant. He cried out as he took a step forward and put his hands with fingers bent into claws before his chest, performing a dragon form that opened its mouth widely to devour everything. Everyone seemed to turn into an illusion of a dragon roaring in their ears. Hujing's pupils constricted suddenly. His tiger punch had already covered Yun Xiao's whole body and was unavoidable. Yet, he did not expect Yun Xiao to give him the impression of swallowing the world by just performing a dragon form. Not only had it destroyed the tiger's might of his punch, but it also looked like a huge mouth, waiting for him to throw himself in. As Hujing closed in, Yun Xiao gave out a smirk. What is this? Why did I feel like I was a sheep walking into a tiger's mouth? Hujing was shocked, but he soon calmed down. No matter how weird your move is, I'm a peak-level apprentice warrior, and I can crush you with just my strength alone." Suddenly a pain came from his arm, and his punch, which he thought could never be missed, landed on empty air. At some point, Yunxiao had bent his 10 fingers into claws, and instead of retreating, he advanced and clutched the claws on Hejing's arm. Then, a sharp pain stabbed into the latter's mind. What made him even angrier was that the burst of strength on his arm vanished as soon as Yunxiao's claws clutched at him, and he could no longer muster any of his strength. After succeeding with the move, Yunxiao threw himself at Hejing and squatted slightly before slamming his right shoulder into the other's chest. Hejing felt nothing but numbness in his chest and a rush of blood in his throat. He staggered back from the impact and took a few steps before he could stand firmly. "Oh well, this body." Yunxiao sighed in his heart, greatly dissatisfied with his current body. If he had Hejing's strength, the dragon style would have completely crippled his opponent's arm, and the subsequent slam would have killed him in seconds. But now, he had only caused pain in the latter's arm and numbness in the chest. What happened just now? Did anyone see it clearly? Yu Hejing's punch was powerful enough to crack a boulder, and I even saw a faint light of primordial qi. How could it be defended so easily? The students started mumbling again as they witnessed a martial apprentice getting pushed back by a normal human. Hejing's face was blank with shock. He still could not figure out what had happened. He could not feel any primordial qi from this brat. Although the move was amazing, it did not come with sufficient strength, or he would have not been simply shaken to the point where his blood started surging. He might have been cautious during normal times, but there stood beside him his goddess at the moment, so he could not lose face at all. Fuming with rage, he roared as he was about to rush over when the girl in a blue dress beside him said, "Senior Yu, forget it." With a look of shame and indignation on his face, Hejing said, "Landuo, give me 5 minutes. I'll cripple this kid and take this chamber for you." Landuo shook her head and said, "Never mind, he got the chamber first." Yunxiao's eyelids twitched slightly as he blurted out, "It's you?" A delicate and beautiful face came into his eyes, causing his thoughts to flutter slightly. Looking at Yunxiao in amazement, Landuo said softly, "I can't believe that just because you can't cultivate your strength, you have started cultivating your skills. The resources of the Li family are abundant indeed. That was an excellent move. However, skills without strength are for mere show." Yunxiao's expression became a little odd, but he agreed. "You're right." Meanwhile, Hejing's face grew darker. He stared at Landuo and asked, "Landuo, do you know him?" Instead of answering him, she smiled and said to Yunxiao, "So, it's impossible for you to defeat me. The gap between us will only grow larger. In fact, you are the young master of the Li family. So, even if you can't cultivate, you will still have a bright future. Why are you so persistent?" "The young master of the Li family?" Hejing was astonished. "He is that infamous loser of the Li family?" His expression suddenly turned odd. He had heard of Yunxiao's reputation as a loser who could never cultivate. Even the Grand Masters of the Alchemist Association could do nothing to help him. So, that kid is that infamous loser. No wonder I can't feel any primordial qi in him. I see. So, he has taken the path of skills. A warrior with amazing skills has a natural advantage in fighting against opponents of the same rank. But no matter how many skills he has mastered, they are useless in the face of an expert whose strength is 10 times greater. Yunxiao knew she had misunderstood, and he had a strange feeling in his heart. Before Gu Feiyang's soul had awakened, he did crazily woo her for a period. He still remembered the words she had uttered so decisively. "My husband must be a hero of indomitable spirit, and he will be a guardian of the state. In spite of your distinguished status, you are, after all, a loser who cannot practice martial arts. Defeat me one day, and only then will I give some thought to your proposal." He also remembered what a huge blow those words had brought to him, making him abandon himself even more. But now, he was no longer that simple Li Yunxiao, he was Gu Feiyang. He had met so many peerless beauties in his previous life who had knelt and cried and begged him to accept them. If they were holding hands together, They could even encircle the entire heavenly martial realm twice. For all her delicateness and beauty, Luo Landuo was a far cry from the beauties he had grown tired of seeing in his previous life. As a result, his heart was filled with a weird feeling right now. What? A good-for-nothing young master like him tried to woo you? He truly overestimated himself. Although Hejing had suffered a minor loss, he was in a good mood as soon as he realized that Yun Xiao was a wastrel. Yun Xiao raised his eyes slightly and gave Hejing a look. The sharp gaze pierced right into Hejing's heart like a blade, causing him to shudder with fear and shut his mouth immediately as beads of cold sweat broke out of his forehead. I think you've misunderstood. Whether I'm a piece of trash or not, I won't fight you. If there's nothing else, I'm going to cultivate. Once he had finished, Yun Xiao waved his hand, and then walked straight into Chamber 013 before closing the door. Landuo was a little taken aback. She narrowed her beautiful eyes as if she were thinking about something. Hejing, on the other hand, widened his eyes as a massive storm surged in his heart. What happened? He's just a piece of trash who can't even open his chakras. But why did I feel cold all over as if I was falling into an abyss when he just glanced at me? Oh heavens, what a glance! He swallowed hard and looked at the closed door of Chamber 013, his forehead dripping with cold sweat. Suddenly, he found that he seemed to have developed a sense of fear for Yun Xiao, which deprived him of his fighting will when he was facing the other again. For your sake, Landuo, I'll spare him this time. Let's go, Hejing said, still in shock and trying to save whatever face he still had. Landuo nodded as she turned and was about to leave when she suddenly gave a slight pause, then looked at Hejing and said, Senior Yu, what Li Yunxiao said just now is right. Although your tiger punch has great momentum, it's only the form. If you could master its essence, you wouldn't have been caught so easily by him. Hejing's face was lividly mixed with red, his eyes full of shame and anger, while his heart harbored an intense hatred for Yun Xiao. As soon as Yun Xiao entered the cultivating chamber, he glanced about and found it to be a space 100 meters squared in area. It was empty but for the 2 chunks of black ironstone placed in the corner, each about a meter tall and with the rough shape of a man. They were obviously the targets of martial arts practice, for they were covered in marks from fists and palms, as well as dents and scratches from swords and knives. One of them was badly damaged, having lost its proper shape. These 2 black iron stones must be over 100 years old. Yun Xiao gave them a glance of admiration and ran his hand across their surfaces for a moment. Regardless of time or place, there were always warriors who were not afraid of hardship, and who poured in all their effort in cultivating as they advanced along the path of the strong. He gave a low cry. Now is not the time to be emotional about these things. I must regain my strength as soon as possible. As long as I unclog my meridians and condense primordial chi, I reckon I will return to the peak of the 9 heavens realm in 10 years. From the condensation of primordial chi to the peak of the 9 heavens realm, no matter how genius an individual was, it would take at least 100 years to achieve it. No one but Gu Feiyang would dare to make such a statement. Yun Xiao rushed forward to throw a punch at the black iron dummy. Under the impact of tenfold gravity, it had been really beneficial for him to practice the tyrant body tempering technique. After throwing some punches, he somewhat understood his body's strength, and then started practicing the sun and moon style. After enduring for the span of 7 breaths, he finally lost his grip and was bounced off the wall. He opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood, his head left reeling. However, there was a smile on his sorry-looking face. Ha ha! Under 10 times the gravity, the effect of the moon and sun style really doubled. In less than 3 days, I will be able to attain the physique of an apprentice warrior, and at that time, I'll have at least a 60% chance of success in breaking through my meridians. He stood up again with his injured body, to start practicing over. A rapid crackle rang out from within him as his body bent backward in an incredible pose. His hands and feet joined to form a perfect circle, and then his muscles and bones began to transform subtly. In addition to the great pain, there was a strange force flowing back and forth within him. It was different from the primordial qi he used to know. The force that flowed through his muscles and blood vessels was a pure physical force. Just as Yunxiao was cultivating in seclusion, the news that he had defeated Yuvijing with one move had spread through the entire tenfold gravity zone. Everyone was pondering over the matter. Although he had the suspicion of resorting to advanced martial skills, the fact that he had defeated a peak-level apprentice warrior who had opened 7 chakras with the physique of an ordinary man still deeply shocked those who heard it, and even overturned the perception of some apprentice warriors. 3 days later, the door of Chamber 013 finally opened, and a man covered in blood walked out of it. The students waiting for their chambers in the public area were all horrified. A thick layer of hardened blood covered the surface of his body like a suit of bloody armor, sticking out like a sore thumb. And from his body came wafting out a pungent smell of sweat and blood, causing all the students to feel their stomachs churning, while some female students even started to vomit as they could not stand it. Apart from the pair of bright eyes, he did not look like a man at all. Under the horrified glances of the crowd, Yunxiao passed through them without even giving them a second look. What no one noticed was that when he first arrived here, he had to pause after every step while panting, but when he left, he looked relaxed as if he was walking on flat ground. Who was that? I can't believe he tortured himself until he looked like a ghost. Did he have to work so hard? You don't know? If I remember correctly, that was Li Yunxiao, who had defeated Yuvijing with one move. Stop lamenting and start cultivating hard, young man. A loser and a girl have already surpassed us. The students waiting in the gravity training hall started mumbling as Yunxiao walked straight into the teleportation array and disappeared from the tenfold gravity zone. Suddenly a cry of alarm echoed out. Everyone looked up and saw the student who was about to enter Chamber 013 standing before the door with a blank face. The puzzled crowd went over to the chamber, and what they saw instantly darkened their faces. A black ironstone target in the cultivation chamber had completely broken into 2, with its upper part lying on the ground. And on the ground was a terrifying mass of blood. Everyone's heart gave a hard jerk. Is this guy still a human being? Yunxiao's appearance in the gravity cultivating hall at the next moment was no less shocking. But the uproar soon calmed down, and all the students who saw him smiled bitterly. Yunxiao finally realized that his current look had attracted too much unwanted attention, so he immediately took a set of clean clothes out of his storage ring and put it on, then walked quickly back to his dormitory. Yunxiao took a shower as soon as he got back to his dormitory. His skin, which was scarred and terrifying to look at, turned out to be as smooth as jade, without a trace of a scar. And between his movements, he clearly felt a force he had long lost. Although it was still very weak, he was very satisfied with it. He wondered if it was truly the #1 body-tempering technique under the heavens, for it had given me a body that was stronger than the one cleansed with a 9th-grade spirit medicine. Now, with the physique of an apprentice warrior, I can start experimenting with some simple concoctions. As long as I can produce some low-level medicinal pills, my cultivation speed can be further accelerated. The strength of an alchemist depended on the strength of the soul, but many basic refinements required physical strength before they could be carried out. After getting out of the bath, Yunxiao then tied up his hair with a rubber band. He was thinking of buying some herbs and refining tools when he suddenly felt a chill in the back of his head. Someone was throwing a punch at him. He snorted coldly and reached a hand behind his back without so much as looking, grabbing toward the incoming attack. A burst of force slammed him in the palm as he closed his fingers tightly and did a backflip, his right hand turning 360 degrees along with his body. The air rang with a bone-cracking sound, accompanied by a loud scream. The person slammed right into the ground. It was Han Bei. He turned around and cried out loudly, "Young Master Yun, it's me. My arm." Only then did Yunxiao see who the person was, and was stunned. Fatty Han? Han Bei winced in pain as he looked at his arm, which was so twisted that it appeared like a braid dough, and said sadly, "Young Master Yun, my arm is crippled." "Serves you right. Who asked you to sneak up on me?" Yun Xiao said crossly. Count yourself lucky that I've merely broken your bone into 7 pieces. Go to the infirmary later. You'll be all right in a few days. Yu Xiao closed and placed his hand gently over Fatty Han's arms as he asked, Why are you here? I saw you were a little odd last time, so I wanted to test you out. It was then that Han Bai said incredulously, Young Master Yun, your strength. Could it be that? Yu Xiao shook his head and said, I haven't opened my chakras yet. What do you want from me? Han Bai's eyes grew wide as he said disappointedly, You've become so strong, and yet you haven't opened your chakras? Where have you been hiding these days? Teacher Luo is looking for you everywhere. What does this little girl want from me? Is she going to send me to the gravity chamber? Yun Xiao said indifferently. Just as he spoke, he stretched Fatty Han's arm to settle the bones back to their original place. Fatty Han cried out in agony. He then fell over on the ground. I reconnected your arm for you, said Yun Xiao. Han Bai broke out in a cold sweat. Little girl, young Master Yun, you're not losing your mind, are you? If you want to die, just say it. Fatty Han instantly stood up, grabbed Yun Xiao tightly, and said one more thing, you might be in big trouble. Lan Fei's gone these days too, and I heard that he's cultivating in seclusion to break into the origin realm. You've crippled Du Feng and Luo Jia, so he'll be looking for you first when he gets out. Yun Xiao glanced at Han Bai, who looked worried and smiled. Just calm down. It's just the origin realm. It's just the origin realm? Han Bai said with anger and frustration. Do you know what the origin realm means? It means an individual has condensed primordial qi and become a real warrior. There's a big difference between warriors and us, apprentice warriors. Qinjin, Princess Ruxue, and I have been worrying about you for days, but look at you. It's just the origin realm, huh? Yun Xiao smiled faintly. He ignored what Fatty Han said and spoke in a serious tone. I have something more important that I will need you to do. What could be more important than this? Said Fatty Han. I'm going to buy something, but I'm short of money. Lend me some. Although Yun Xiao was the young master of the Li family, he had long been excluded from the family, and his pocket money was not much. Han Bai produced his bag of holding and poured out a pile of gold coins. There are about 200 or 300 gold coins here, enough to last you a year. Just Han Bai was about to leave, he turned to look at Yun Xiao and said, Are you really not worried at all? You know, there are over 3,000 freshmen in our intake, but only about 30 have made the breakthrough so far and become warriors. It is very dangerous. Oh, I'm worried, but it's no use worrying. How much money do you have now? Lend me it all and I'll pay you back some other time. Yun Xiao again ignored what Fatty Han said and gave out a sinister smile while waving at Han Bai. Young Master Yun, I can feel that you've changed a lot. I got to hand it to you. As he was about to reach the door and open it up, just then, a loud bang suddenly rang out, and his fat body was subsequently thrown flying back. He left a trail of blood in the air before falling to the ground next to Yun Xiao's feet, where he passed out. There was a distinct footprint on his bulging belly. A cold snort came from outside the door, and then a shadow was thrown over, falling next to Fatty Han. The man was covered in blood, his face swollen like a winter melon as he groaned in pain while being sprawled on the ground, muttering something that could not be understood. Yu Xiao stared at him for a while before he recognized the man as Qinjin. He raised his head to look at the door. It was Lan Fei. You piece of trash who has no idea of death or danger. More than a dozen people rushed in through the door, led by none other than Lan Fei. Li Yun Xiao, how dare you touch my men? Today, I'm going to cripple you completely. He walked proudly ahead, his energy rising with every step. By the time he came up to Yun Xiao, a bright light shone out of him, making him look mighty. It was the light of primordial qi, the sign of a warrior.
Lan Fei strode confidently forward, his chest swelling with pride and determination. With each step, his energy surged, a palpable force propelling him forward. As he approached Yun Xiao, a radiant glow enveloped him, casting him in an aura of power and might. It was the unmistakable brilliance of primordial qi, a testament to his newfound status as a warrior. Behind Lan Fei, Du Feng's voice rang out, filled with urgency and desperation. His plea for vengeance echoed in the air, a stark reminder of past grievances. Yet, his discomfort was evident, his movements hindered by the burden of bandages wrapped tightly around his crotch. Beside him, Luo Jie seethed with anger, his features contorted with fury as he bristled with pent-up rage. Yun Xiao's gaze fell upon Lan Fei, his expression a mix of skepticism and disdain. He couldn't help but mock the ostentatious display of power, likening Lan Fei's glow to that of a luminous pearl. His attention briefly shifted to Han Bai and Chen Zhan, assessing their injuries with a sense of relief upon confirming they weren't fatal. However, beneath the surface, a simmering rage smoldered, his eyes betraying his murderous intent. Lan Fei recoiled at Yun Xiao's taunt, his bravado faltering momentarily in the face of such disdain. With a tremor in his voice, he issued a threat, his words dripping with malice as he demanded submission from Yun Xiao. The prospect of exacting revenge for Du Feng's suffering fueled his resolve, driving him to assert his dominance over his adversary. Yun Xiao's response was swift and cutting, his tone laced with cold fury. A surge of energy emanated from him, though lacking the overt power of primordial qi. It carried an undeniable force that sent shivers down the spines of all present. Lan Fei felt a sense of dread creeping over him, an inexplicable fear gripping his heart as he struggled to comprehend the sudden shift in power dynamics. Summoning his courage, Lan Fei brandished his sword, the weight of his actions settling heavily upon him. With a furious roar, he launched himself at Yun Xiao. The inexplicable sense of fear gripped Lan Fei like a vice, sending shivers down his spine and setting his nerves on edge. It was a sensation so overwhelming that he feared if he didn't act decisively, he might lose his courage altogether. Standing there, facing Yun Xiao, it felt as though he was on a small boat tossed amidst stormy waves, teetering on the brink of disaster. With a fierce determination, Lan Fei pushed aside his doubts, focusing all his strength and resolve into his arms. He knew he had to act swiftly and decisively to overcome the looming threat before him. Yun Xiao's nod of approval only served to fuel his determination further as he steeled himself for the confrontation ahead. In response to Lan Fei's attack, Yun Xiao casually drew a black iron sword, effortlessly holding it in a defensive stance that deflected Lan Fei's assault. The sight incited fury in Lan Fei, his face flushing red as he doubled down on his attack, infusing his strikes with the power of primordial qi. The clash of their swords rang out violently, sparks flying as the force of their collision reverberated through the air. Lan Fei's attack seemed formidable, cracking Yun Xiao's palms and sending him staggering backward. Despite the impact, Yun Xiao managed to maintain his footing, his balance unwavering even as he retreated several steps. However, the black iron sword he wielded bore the mark of their conflict, a deep cut marring its surface. The scene unfolded in disbelief before the onlookers, their wide-eyed stares rooted to the ground in astonishment. Lan Fei's shock mirrored that of his companions, his mind reeling at the unexpected turn of events. How could Yun Xiao, a mere apprentice warrior, block his attack with such ease? The realization dawned on Lan Fei that perhaps there was more to Yun Xiao than met the eye. Could he have unlocked his chakras without manifesting primordial qi? As warm blood filled his mouth, Yun Xiao couldn't help but chuckle, a sense of satisfaction permeating his demeanor. Despite the oddity of his current situation, the thrill of battle coursed through him, invigorating him with a sense of purpose. His laughter echoed in the air. Yun Xiao stood tall, his sword raised defiantly as he beckoned Lan Fei forward with a challenge. His arrogance was palpable, evident in the smug curve of his lips as he taunted his opponent. Lan Fei's fury surged, his face flushed with anger at the audacity of Yun Xiao's provocation. With a deep breath, he suppressed the shock reverberating through his mind, channeling his rage into a determined resolve. Raising his own sword, Lan Fei summoned forth a torrent of primordial qi, the energy crackling along the blade as he launched himself at Yun Xiao. The passing cloud slash technique, honed through relentless training as an apprentice warrior, was now his to wield as a true one-star warrior. With a defiant shout, Lan Fei charged forward, his intent clear, to strike down his adversary with overwhelming force. The onlookers behind Lan Fei watched in stunned disbelief, their eyes widening as the clash unfolded before them. Du Feng's excitement bubbled over, his shrill voice cutting through the tension as he identified Lan Fei's technique. Yet, amidst the anticipation, Yun Xiao remained composed, his voice calm as he began to offer unsolicited advice. As Lan Fei surged toward him, Yun Xiao's words pierced through the chaos, his commentary on the passing cloud sword technique a direct challenge to Lan Fei's skill. The insult stoked the flames of Lan Fei's fury, threatening to overwhelm him as he struggled to maintain his focus. With a snarl, he dismissed Yun Xiao's words, his determination unwavering as he pressed on with his attack. The blade descended with blinding speed, aimed to strike down Yun Xiao with lethal precision. But in a swift and effortless motion, Yun Xiao countered, his own sword rising to meet the onslaught. With a casual flick of his wrist, he redirected the force of Lan Fei's strike, sending the glowing sword hurtling through the air until it embedded itself into the ceiling with a resounding thud. Yun Xiao's voice rang out, a quiet reminder of the lesson learned: count yourself lucky to have received my advice. The sudden silence that followed was deafening, the room frozen in shock at the unexpected turn of events. Lan Fei stood before Yun Xiao, his breaths ragged as he struggled to comprehend the defeat he had just suffered. Yun Xiao stood poised, his body trembling slightly from the rush of primordial qi surging through the blade into his veins. Despite the pain that threatened to overwhelm him, he remained steadfast, twisting his body into a peculiar stance that seemed to counteract the agony coursing through him. With a steely resolve, he prepared to face whatever came next. Meanwhile, Lan Fei stood frozen, his gaze fixed on his torn palms, oblivious to the danger looming before him. Without warning, Yun Xiao's foot lashed out, connecting with Lan Fei's face with a force that sent him hurtling backward, blood spewing from his mouth as he collided with the ground. The onlookers were stunned into silence, their minds unable to process the rapid turn of events. Their mouths gaped open in disbelief, muscles tensing in shock as they struggled to comprehend the unfolding spectacle. As Lan Fei regained his bearings, his mind raced to catch up with the chaos around him. It was only when a chilling sensation gripped his senses that he realized Yun Xiao's sword was perilously close to his groin. Panic surged through him as he grasped the dire situation, his legs trembling with fear as he confronted Yun Xiao's cold gaze. Filled with a mixture of shock and indignation, Lan Fei mustered his courage to confront his assailant. "What do you think you're doing? You wouldn't dare," he spluttered, his voice wavering with a hint of desperation. Yun Xiao's expression remained impassive, his eyes flashing with disdain as he retorted, "Dare? Oh, I wouldn't dream of it. I'm trembling with fear, you see." Mockingly, he wobbled his hand, causing the blade to sway dangerously close to Lan Fei's vulnerable anatomy, eliciting a primal fear that permeated the air. Lan Fei's resolve crumbled as he faced the imminent threat, his legs quivering uncontrollably as the pungent scent of urine tainted the tense atmosphere.
"No."
"Please, don't," he pleaded, his voice cracking with terror. Yun Xiao's gaze hardened, a cold gleam in his eyes as he refused to yield to Lan Fei's pleas. Yun Xiao said, "I'm too lazy to settle the previous score with you, but you've injured Fatty Han and Skinny Chun this time, and even tried to kill me. Now, tell me, how am I going to swallow the resentment if I don't cut off your manhood? Please, I beg you. I'll do anything you say. Please be merciful." Lan Fei cried out, frightened out of his wits. After all, he was only a 15-year-old teenager, so his arrogance and courage were instantly gone at the prospect of losing his manhood. The dozens of students present, too, were all teenagers of apprentice warrior level. Although they had witnessed their boss, who was so lofty and mighty during normal times, lay wailing on the ground like a weakling and even peeing his pants, none of them thought of him a disgrace. Any man would be scared out of his wits in such a situation, especially when they stole glances at Du Feng and Luo Jia. Their faces turned extremely pale, and they all stood where they were, not daring to make a sound. Yun Xiao's words hung heavy in the air, his offer to spare Lan Fei's manhood in exchange for money slicing through the tension like a knife. Lan Fei's heart leaped at the lifeline dangled before him, a desperate hope blooming in the face of impending doom. Hastily, he reached for the storage ring on his finger, fingers fumbling in his urgency to remove it. But as panic seized him, the ring seemed to resist, clinging stubbornly to his finger despite his frantic efforts. With a glance that pierced through the crowd, Yun Xiao's demand sent shockwaves rippling through the onlookers. Each one hurriedly complied, their hands reaching for their own storage rings, eager to appease the ominous figure before them. As the rings were relinquished, Yun Xiao's gaze returned to Lan Fei, his demeanor cool and calculating. Trembling but emboldened by the prospect of escape, Lan Fei dared to voice his question, a glimmer of hope flickering in his eyes. Yet, before he could receive an answer, Yun Xiao's attention was drawn to a jade pendant hanging from Lan Fei's waist. His heart skipped a beat at the sight, and with a deft flick of his sword, the pendant was snatched from its resting place and into Yun Xiao's grasp. A flicker of surprise danced in Yun Xiao's eyes as he admired the intricate design of the pendant. Despite Lan Fei's protests, his grip on the precious heirloom tightened, a possessive gleam lighting up his gaze. Lan Fei's face paled at the sudden turn of events, his voice trembling with desperation as he pleaded for the return of the pendant. But Yun Xiao's cold glare bore into him, unwavering in its intensity. Panic surged through Lan Fei, his forehead slick with cold sweat as he implored Yun Xiao to understand the pendant's significance. It was not just a trinket. It was a cherished heirloom, a symbol of his family's legacy. To lose it would mean facing the wrath of his family, a fate too dire to contemplate. Yun Xiao's demeanor hardened as he raised his sword, his voice cutting through the tense atmosphere like a blade. The group of teenagers trembled in fear, their eyes darting anxiously between Yun Xiao and Lan Fei, awaiting his decision with bated breath. Lan Fei's expression darkened considerably, torn between his own desires and the well-being of those who had accompanied him. In his heart, the jade pendant held immeasurable value, a cherished heirloom passed down through generations. Yet, the weight of responsibility pressed heavily upon him as he considered the fate of the teenagers who looked to him for guidance. These youths were not just random acquaintances. They were the children of families intricately tied to the Lan family, some even direct descendants. To forsake them in favor of his own possessions would not only betray their trust, but also tarnish his reputation irreparably. The thought of condemning them to such a fate filled Lan Fei with a deep sense of shame and guilt. A momentary pause that seemed to stretch on infinitely until a voice broke through the silence. "Boss!" The cry rang out, breaking the stillness as one of the girls among them couldn't contain her urgency any longer. Lan Fei's expression tightened at the interruption, his features contorted with a mixture of anger and frustration. With a deep breath, Lan Fei finally spoke, his voice resonating with authority despite the turmoil raging within him. He declared his decision, prioritizing the lives of his companions over his own possessions. Though his words carried a veneer of resolve, the shame burning in his cheeks betrayed the true depth of his sacrifice. As Lan Fei attempted to maintain an air of nonchalance, his humiliation was laid bare for all to see. The wetness seeping into his pants and the purple flush staining his complexion exposed the extent of his embarrassment. Yun Xiao's eyes narrowed, a flicker of something dark flashing across his gaze as he observed Lan Fei's feeble attempt at bravado. Without warning, he swung his sword with deadly precision, the blade slicing through the air like a bolt of lightning aimed directly at Lan Fei's throat. Caught in the grip of paralyzing fear, Lan Fei found himself ensnared by an invisible force, his body frozen in place as the icy tendrils of Yun Xiao's murderous intent pierced through him. In a desperate bid for self-preservation, Lan Fei instinctively reached out, seizing the nearest girl and pulling her in front of him as a shield. The girl struggled against his grasp, her futile attempts to break free overshadowed by Lan Fei's superior strength. Helpless and terrified, she became an unwitting pawn in Lan Fei's desperate bid for survival. But just as the sword hovered perilously close to its target, Yun Xiao halted his advance with an abrupt movement. With a disarming smile, he revealed the jest behind his actions, his words dripping with sarcasm as he granted them reprieve. The relief that washed over Lan Fei was quickly eclipsed by a surge of anger and humiliation. His lackey's silent reproach pierced through him like daggers, their disapproving stares fueling the flames of his fury. With a clenched jaw and blazing eyes, Lan Fei stormed out of Yun Xiao's dormitory, his heart heavy with resentment and indignation. He vowed never to set foot in that place again, his pride wounded and his reputation tarnished by the events that had transpired. Yun Xiao's fingers deftly clasped the jade pendant, his eyes alight with anticipation as he examined it closely. With a satisfied smile, he confirmed its authenticity, identifying it as the coveted five-colored divine air stone. Swiftly, he stowed away the precious pendant, his expression shifting into a sneer as he addressed the empty space above him. "It's about time for you to show yourself after looking for so long," he taunted, his voice laced with arrogance and triumph. The silence that followed was broken by a sudden disturbance from above as Jia Rong, cloaked in black attire, descended gracefully from the ceiling. As Jia Rong landed on the ground, his gaze locked onto Yun Xiao, a myriad of emotions swirling in his eyes. He regarded Yun Xiao with a mixture of disbelief and curiosity, his mind reeling from the events he had witnessed. Despite his initial intentions to confront Yun Xiao and extract the cure by force, Zhao Rong now hesitated. The display of power he had witnessed left him wary and uncertain of his ability to overpower Yun Xiao. Despite being a mid-tier warrior, he harbored doubts about his chances of subduing Yun Xiao, let alone capturing him alive. Yun Xiao's casual inquiry snapped Zhao Rong out of his reverie, prompting an automatic response as he relayed his findings. Maintaining a facade of composure, he explained the challenges he had faced in procuring the necessary ingredients, expressing regret at only being able to secure 6 sets due to the rarity of certain herbs. Yun Xiao accepted the report without hesitation, his tone dismissive as he instructed Zhao Rong to hand over the herbs. However, his attention quickly turned to the injured Han Bai and Chen Zhan, indicating that they should be healed first. Zhao Rong's initial compliance faltered at Yun Xiao's command, his expression darkening as he bristled at being ordered around. His frustration bubbled to the surface as he challenged Yun Xiao's authority, refusing to be treated as a subordinate. Unfazed by Zhao Rong's defiance, Yun Xiao met his glare with a cold stare, issuing a blunt ultimatum. Zhao Rong seethed with anger, his frustration palpable as he grappled with the indignity of being ordered around by someone he considered beneath him. Despite his prestigious status as a mid-tier warrior and esteemed alchemist, he found himself reluctantly complying with Yun Xiao's demands. The weight of his own vulnerability in the face of Yun Xiao's power left him feeling powerless and humiliated. With a resigned sigh, Zhao Rong begrudgingly bent over to inspect the injuries of Han Bai and Chen Zhan, his hands trembling with suppressed rage. Extracting 2 pale yellow pills from his ring, he administered them to the injured youths, his actions a begrudging acknowledgement of his debt to Yun Xiao. "It's done," he declared curtly, his voice tinged with resentment as he turned to face Yun Xiao. "Now, it's time for you to fulfill your end of the bargain. I've done everything you asked, and I won't be taking any more orders from you." Yun Xiao's response was a subtle blend of amusement and condescension, his words dripping with sarcasm as he taunted Zhao Rong. The implication that Zhao Rong would eventually beg to be commanded by Yun Xiao only fueled Zhao Rong's frustration, prompting an outburst of anger. Enraged by Yun Xiao's insinuations, Zhao Rong accused him of deceit, his voice filled with indignation. However, Yun Xiao's dismissive retort only served to exacerbate Zhao Rong's fury, leaving him seething with resentment. As Yun Xiao nonchalantly produced a piece of paper and sent it flying towards Zhao Rong, the force behind it took Zhao Rong by surprise. Catching the paper with a mixture of apprehension and curiosity, Zhao Rong's expression darkened as he read its contents. Though uncertain of its accuracy, he could discern enough to realize that Yun Xiao had not deceived him. With a heavy heart and a begrudging acknowledgement of Yun Xiao's integrity, Zhao Rong conceded defeat. Despite his lingering resentment, he knew that he was indebted to Yun Xiao and that their agreement had been fulfilled. With a final glance of disdain, Zhao Rong turned to leave, his pride wounded but his honor intact. As Zhao Rong made his way out, his steps heavy with a mixture of resentment and resignation, Yun Xiao's voice cut through the air with deliberate calmness. His words hung in the air, laden with an unsettling certainty that sent a shiver down Zhao Rong's spine. The prescription can remove the toxin of both the Hellwind Stone and Blood Fame Orchid from your body without leaving behind any side effects, Yun Xiao stated casually, his tone betraying a hint of amusement at the revelation. But it was the next words that struck Zhao Rong like a thunderbolt, freezing him in his tracks. The mention of the regression of his soul power sent a chill coursing through his veins, his body going rigid with shock. The realization that his very essence, the soul power that defined him as an alchemist, had been corroded by the toxic substances he had been exposed to was a bitter pill to swallow. Yun Xiao's words painted a bleak picture of the future, one where the road to recovery was fraught with insurmountable obstacles. The prospect of spending decades in a futile attempt to regain his former prowess weighed heavily on Zhao Rong's mind, threatening to crush his spirit under its oppressive weight. The mention of a shortcut, however, sparked a glimmer of hope amidst the darkness. But it was a fragile hope, one that seemed almost too good to be true. Zhao Rong's skepticism bubbled to the surface, his voice trembling with uncertainty as he dared to question Yun Xiao's offer. Yun Xiao's response was swift and cutting, his words laced with disdain as he dismissed Zhao Rong's doubts with a contemptuous sneer. The implication that he would stoop so low as to lie to someone like Zhao Rong struck a nerve, stoking the flames of Zhao Rong's indignation. Zhao Rong's mind whirled with conflicting emotions, torn between disbelief and desperation. The allure of reclaiming his lost power in a mere 50 days was too tantalizing to ignore, even if it meant placing his trust in someone as enigmatic and untrustworthy as Yun Xiao. With a heavy heart and a sense of trepidation, Jiao Rong swallowed his pride and yielded to Yun Xiao's offer, his voice a shaky whisper as he beseeched Yun Xiao for reassurance. Yun Xiao's index finger rose, pointing assertively as he spoke, his voice carrying a cold, confident tone. His declaration cut through the air, landing squarely on Jiao Rong's ears, sending shivers down his spine. "It's not about recovering your soul power," he sneered, his eyes glinting with a sharp, calculating light. "It's about making you a real first-tier alchemist." Jiao Rong felt a lump form in his throat as he swallowed hard, his heart pounding with uncertainty. "What do you need from me so that you can help me?" he managed to stammer out, his voice trembling with a mixture of fear and curiosity. "Be my servant." Yun Xiao's words struck like a bolt of lightning, sending a surge of indignation coursing through Jiao Rong's veins. "Impossible," he retorted angrily, his pupils dilating with disbelief. "You're just an ignorant kid, and yet you want to make an alchemist your servant. How arrogant." Yun Xiao remained composed, his posture relaxed as he sat quietly on the stairs. An aura of natural authority surrounded him, emanating an air of superiority. With a hint of disdain in his eyes, he spoke coldly, "If it wasn't for my lack of strength right now, do you think you are qualified to be my servant? Even so, you are only qualified to be my servant for 50 days. After that, I want you to get out of my sight." Jiao Rong's mind reeled with shock, his thoughts spinning in confusion. Yun Xiao's words had left him speechless, his head swimming with a mix of disbelief and apprehension. "Oh heavens, what the hell is going on?" he thought frantically. "Who is this brat? A lunatic? But if he's a lunatic, how is he able to tell my problem with just a glance, and even has a way to solve it? I've searched through the whole Alchemists Association, but couldn't find a solution." Yun Xiao's faint voice cut through Jiao Rong's tumultuous thoughts. "Do you feel aggrieved about being my servant?" he asked, his tone almost mocking. "What rubbish, of course I feel aggrieved." Jiao Rong seethed inwardly, his mind racing with frustration and indignation. But before he could voice his protest, a strange golden light suddenly flashed in Yun Xiao's eyes, causing Jiao Rong's heart to skip a beat. As Jiao Rong's eyes widened in terror, he felt an overwhelming fear gripping his soul, as if he stood in the presence of a deity. His body trembled uncontrollably, and his legs gave out beneath him, collapsing onto the hard bluestone floor. Cold sweat coated his skin, and a weight pressed down on his very essence, preventing him from lifting his head or even uttering a word. The sheer magnitude of the sensation left Jiao Rong bewildered and terrified. How could a mere teenager exude such an imposing aura, one that seemed to emanate from the depths of his soul? Questions raced through his mind, but there were no answers to be found. The disdainful gaze of Yun Xiao pierced through him, leaving him feeling utterly insignificant, as if his very soul lay bare before this enigmatic figure. Yun Xiao's voice cut through the chaos of Jiao Rong's thoughts, offering him a choice. 3 breaths to decide his fate. The weight of the decision hung heavy in the air. Acceptance could lead to great heights, while refusal might result in a lifetime of regret. It was a pivotal moment, one that would shape the course of Jiao Rong's existence. Summoning every ounce of resolve, Jiao Rong clenched his teeth and made his decision. "I'm willing," he managed to choke out, the words carrying the weight of his fate. But as soon as the declaration left his lips, a wave of relief washed over him, and he collapsed in exhaustion, drained by the ordeal. Yun Xiao's eyes glinted with satisfaction at Jiao Rong's response. "Not bad," he remarked, a hint of approval in his tone. "Your decisiveness will serve you well." With a sense of finality, Yun Xiao acknowledged Jiao Rong's acceptance, cementing their newfound relationship. "Now that you have recognized me as your master," he declared, "I'll naturally not mistreat you." Yun Xiao's command echoed through the room as he flicked his finger, sending a sheet of paper gliding towards Jiao Rong. The paper fluttered in the air before landing gracefully in Jiao Rong's hands. With trembling fingers, Jiao Rong unfolded the paper, his eyes widening in shock as he read the contents. The instructions on the paper detailed a soul cultivation technique. Jiao Rong couldn't believe his eyes. A soul cultivation technique was rare and immensely valuable. It was a method to enhance one's spiritual power, a crucial aspect for alchemists. Jiao Rong's heart raced with excitement as he realized the potential this technique held for him. Yun Xiao's voice cut through Jiao Rong's reverie, dismissing the technique as trashy. However, he assured Jiao Rong that despite its humble origins, The technique was sufficient to elevate him to the coveted rank of a first-tier alchemist within a mere 5 days. This revelation sent a surge of hope and determination coursing through Jiao Rong's veins. Overwhelmed with gratitude, Jiao Rong addressed Yunxiao respectfully as Master, expressing disbelief at the incredible opportunity before him. Yunxiao corrected him, insisting on being called Young Master Yun. Despite the humbleness of the soul cultivation technique, Yunxiao promised ample rewards for faithful service. With a newfound sense of purpose, Jiao Rong carefully stowed away the precious paper in an exquisite jade box before tucking it into his storage ring. He bowed deeply to young Master Yun, his heart brimming with gratitude and determination. With a final farewell, he departed, his mind racing with anticipation for the transformation that awaited him. As Jiao Rong left the academy, he felt a sense of elation and wonder at the unexpected turn of events. The sky above seemed clearer, the sun brighter, and his heart brimmed with joy and excitement. The encounter with young Master Yun had left him with a whirlwind of thoughts racing through his mind. He pondered over the mysterious figure of young Master Yun. Who was this young Master Yun? How could he have employed such a potent technique on me? Jiao Rong mused. As an alchemist, he was well versed in the arts of the mind and soul, and he couldn't shake off the feeling of being manipulated. The revelation of the soul-cultivating technique left Jiao Rong astounded. In the world of alchemy, where the soul's power was paramount, such a technique was considered invaluable. It was unheard of for someone to possess such knowledge, let alone offer it freely. Jiao Rong couldn't help but feel a sense of disbelief and gratitude at his unexpected fortune. With cautious steps, Jiao Rong made his way back to the alchemist's tower, all the while concealing the precious knowledge he had obtained. Despite his excitement, he knew the importance of keeping such information hidden, especially in the competitive world of alchemy. Yunxiao was seated on the floor, his thoughts consumed by introspection. He couldn't help but lament the weakening of his soul power after his rebirth. In his previous life, such a setback would have been inconceivable. However, in his current state, his soul power was not even comparable to that of a regular first-tier alchemist. Despite this, he managed to momentarily incapacitate Jiao Rong using a soul-confusing mystic art. With his legs crossed and his eyes partially shut, Yunxiao began to witness the emergence of a golden script in his mind. However, the script appeared as indecipherable characters resembling tadpoles, continuously flickering and disappearing before his eyes. Since his soul had awakened in this new body, Yunxiao was confident that he would eventually rise to become one of the most formidable individuals of his generation. Yet, his aspirations went beyond mere strength. He aimed to transcend the limits of his previous existence. His ultimate goal was to achieve a breakthrough into the legendary realm, a feat that seemed almost impossible. Yunxiao's newfound reliance was not solely on the memories of his past life or the tyrant body tempering technique. Instead, it stemmed from a soul cultivation technique he stumbled upon in the Tiandang Mountains shortly before his demise, the Great Expansion Divine Technique. This soul cultivation technique was entirely unfamiliar to him, its contents surpassing even his wildest imagination. Yunxiao firmly believed that the reason behind his soul's rebirth lay intertwined with this mysterious technique. In fact, the voice echoing in his mind as he recollected memories from his previous life seemed to be reciting the text of this divine technique. On the heavenly martial continent, cultivators were primarily categorized as either martial or alchemy cultivators. Martial cultivators predominantly focused on qi cultivation, while a minority delved into flesh cultivation, known as common warriors. On the other hand, alchemy cultivators prioritized the cultivation of the soul, earning them the title of alchemists. Each category corresponded to the spirit, energy, and soul aspects of human beings. Regardless of the path chosen, reaching the pinnacle in any one aspect could elevate an individual to become a formidable force capable of shaking the entire continent. As a martial cultivator who had already elevated his energy and soul to sovereign levels, Yunxiao was acutely aware of the importance of balance and synergy among the three aspects. The few conferred martial sovereigns who stood at the peak of power had mastered 2 out of the 3 aspects, granting them unparalleled strength compared to their counterparts. Yunxiao found himself trapped at the pinnacle of the 9 heavens realm before realizing that his physical strength had become a hindrance to further progress. This realization compelled him to seek out the tyrant body tempering technique. He understood that only when his body, qi, and soul simultaneously reached their peak could he advance towards the legendary 10 worlds realm. His mind raced with thoughts as he contemplated the newfound potential offered by the Great Expansion Divine Technique. With this technique, He believed he could elevate his soul power to the pinnacle of the sovereign realm. When combined with the tyrant's body tempering technique, he envisioned achieving an invincible state by merging all three aspects into one, thereby breaking through into the 10 worlds divine realm. A glint of determination shone in his eyes as he seemed to peer through the vast expanse of space towards an unseen horizon. Later, Yunxiao retrieved a jade he had taken from Lan Fei. He recognized its potential for enhancing his current body and clearing his meridians. He calculated that he could fashion at least 13 divine needles from the piece of 5-color divine air stone within the jade, a quantity sufficient for his needs. Settling down, he initiated the Great Expansion Divine Technique. Astonishingly, his damaged soul power began to regenerate at an alarming rate, swiftly reaching the pinnacle level of an apprentice alchemist. Although he acknowledged that his soul power still fell short of that of a first-tier alchemist, Yunxiao deemed it sufficient for crafting the divine needles and concocting the required potion. From the materials provided by Jiarong, Yunxiao retrieved an ingredient known as purple gold sand. He ground it into a fine powder and used it to inscribe a pentacle-shaped array on the ground. As he completed the array, a strange energy began to emanate from its patterns. Next, he placed the 5-color divine air stone on the ground and brandished the black sword with all his strength. With a resounding boom, the stone shattered into countless tiny fragments. A golden light flickered across his brow as an invisible stream of soul power enveloped the shattered pieces, lifting them above the array. As the tiny fragments of stone hovered above the array, they began to tremble gradually, their movements growing more rapid with each passing moment. Yunxiao carefully manipulated their rhythm using his soul power, guiding them to leap in a controlled manner. Additionally, he arranged over a dozen glass vessels of different sizes and shapes in a neat row on the ground. With a determined gleam in his eyes, Yunxiao swiftly retrieved various ingredients from his storage bag and placed them into the respective vessels. Soon, distinct reactions began to manifest within each container. The minute fragments of the divine stone crackled akin to frying beans as they melted into a thick, viscous substance upon the array. Meanwhile, gases of varied hues emanated from the vessels, and the liquids inside bubbled with colorful effervescence. Yunxiao extended his soul power, overseeing the progression of each reaction with his divine sense. With a subtle gesture, 9 streams of liquid materialized precisely under his command. Condense, Yunxiao uttered softly as he gestured towards the empty space before him. Instantly, the extracted energy essence above the array condensed into 13 minuscule needles, each glimmering as they gently descended into his awaiting hand. Following the formation of the needles, the 9 liquids merged swiftly, blending into a dark green solution. The atmosphere resonated with the cacophony of boiling sounds, and the temperature seemed to surge dramatically within an instant. Despite merely standing there, Yunxiao felt a gradual heat enveloping his body, seeping into his skin with intensity. Carefully, he retrieved the 5-color divine air needles and inserted them into his body one by one. With each insertion, he experienced a sensation akin to a force piercing through his skin and into his meridians. Yet, rather than pain, he felt an overwhelming sense of relief. As the potency of the potion permeated his being, it traversed his major meridians, gradually unclogging the damaged and desiccated invisible pathways. Suddenly, a muffled boom reverberated from within his body, signaling the instantaneous breakthrough of all his meridians. In that moment, Yunxiao sensed the pent-up power within his chakras finally being unleashed, flooding through his entire being. The room was aglow as Yunxiao's chakra radiated with brilliance, emitting 5 distinct streams of light. The entire space was bathed in the luminance of the chakras, casting an ethereal glow alongside the pale green mist that filled the room. Stepping out from the mist, Yunxiao couldn't help but lament, "It's a shame I've only unlocked 5 chakras." With utmost care, he stowed away the divine needles, noting their diminished size after just a single use. The potency of the 5-color divine air needles in stimulating the body's potential is truly remarkable. I must find a way to acquire the other 4 pendants from the Lan family, he resolved. After a moment of contemplation, he changed into fresh attire and departed the training room. Upon entering the hall, he encountered Chen Zhan and Han by emerging from another chamber. While their injuries had nearly healed, Chen Zhan's swollen face remained conspicuous. "Young Master Yun," they exclaimed simultaneously, their expressions a blend of shock and fury. "Lan Fei and his lackeys have gone too far," Han Bai growled. "To poison you with such intensity, does he dare to openly attempt murder?" Chunjin seethed with anger. I wish to rally 10,000 men and obliterate those insolent brats of the Lan family. Are you all right, young Master Yun? It was only then that Yun Xiao noticed his skin had taken on a pale green hue, a residual effect of the potion's potency still coursing through his veins. Offering a brief explanation, Yun Xiao watched as Qin Zhan and Han Bai stood frozen, dumbfounded by the revelation. Fatty Han exclaimed, Young Master Yun, you mean to say you've single-handedly confronted and even plundered them? Chunjin inquired incredulously, Young Master Yun, you mean you've cleared your meridians and unlocked 5 chakras? Their expressions mirrored astonishment as they exchanged bewildered glances. Suddenly, Chunjun burst into laughter. Haha, I knew it. How could the son of General Fai Long be anything less than extraordinary? Without uttering a word, you've surpassed us in strength. Excellent. Once the 3 of us graduate and assume our family titles, we shall mobilize a 1,000,000-strong force to annihilate the Lan family's impudent scoundrels. Han Bai's initial shock gradually subsided, replaced by a contemplative expression. It's certainly a momentous achievement that young Master Yun Xiao has unlocked his chakras. However, the trouble he faces has also escalated. Lan Fei and his cronies won't simply let this matter slide. I fear that young Master Yun is now in even greater peril. Chun Zhan, caught up in his heroic fantasies, dismissed the concern. They're nothing more than a group of troublemakers. Now that they're no match for young Master Yun, they won't dare to cause trouble again. Do you really think they'd be bold enough to stir up trouble within the academy? In the state of Tianshui, there were only 2 martial kings who had advanced to the 5 elements realm. One of them was Zhong Lishan, the dean of Jialan Academy, who boasted of being the strongest individual in the entire state. Jialan Academy, like every other institution, had its own set of regulations. Even the emperor would have to adhere to these rules during his visits. However, Han Bai interjected, shaking his head gravely. While Lan Fei may not pose a significant threat, have you forgotten about the individual ranked 3rd on the minor power chart? Chun Zhan's expression shifted abruptly, his visage turning grim. The minor power chart mentioned by Han Bai was an annual ranking list established by the Academy, reset through a yearly competition. Currently holding the 3rd position on this chart was none other than Lan Fei's half-brother and fellow direct descendant of the Lan family, Lan Xian. In his previous incarnation as Gu Feiyang, Yun Xiao wouldn't have given the minor power chart a second thought. After all, he was an unparalleled expert, ranked 3rd across the entire continent. Han Bai continued with a wry smile. Lan Xian is set to graduate this year. He's reputed to possess formidable strength and is rumored to be striving to break through into the 2 forces realm. Chun Zhan's apprehension grew. He's aiming to become a martial master? If he succeeds, he'll be eligible to join the Guardian of the State immediately upon graduation. He's truly remarkable. Isn't Lan Xian merely 18 years old? Han Bai nodded solemnly, acknowledging the rarity of an 18-year-old martial master, especially in the state of Tianshui. At the pace he's advancing, there's a strong possibility that he'll rise to become the deputy commander of the Guardians. Qin Zhan's expression grew even grimmer. As a martial master, he wouldn't concern himself with such trivial matters, would he? He probably won't personally intervene, Han Bai speculated. We still have some time before the break. Hopefully, we can manage until he graduates. A faint smile played on Yun Xiao's lips as he spoke with a glint of determination in his eyes. You can trust that he'll come to me. But even if he doesn't, I'll seek him out. In his heart, Yun Xiao sneered, because I can't wait to lay my hands on the piece of 5-color divine air stone he carries. Meanwhile, inside a refined building within the academy, Lan Fei seethed with fury. Uncle, I can't let this slide. Wang Feng's demeanor turned cold as he rebuked. Shut your mouth, you fool. You nearly made a grave mistake. Thankfully, Lan Xian is currently in seclusion, or your mother's efforts would have been in vain. Lan Fei's initial shock gave way to disbelief. Is it really that serious? I just want Lan Xian to help me teach that worthless trash a lesson and vent my frustration. Wang Feng's tone dripped with sarcasm as he retorted. Vent your frustration? Huh. And you still have the audacity to address him as Brother Xian? You're as foolish as they come. That piece of trash from the Li family is inconsequential. Your true adversary is Lan Xian. Now that you've lost the token of the family's direct descendant, you'll face the family's wrath. At best, you'll be reprimanded and fall out of favor. However, if they take this matter seriously, you may even be demoted to a branch member. Panic washed over Lan Fei's features. What should I do? He pleaded. his voice tinged with fear. You have to help me, uncle. Wang Feng, with a serious expression, squinted his eyes slightly as he addressed the situation at hand. Don't fret. You're my sister's son after all. If I don't lend you a hand, who else would I help? His tone conveyed a sense of responsibility mixed with familial obligation. However, he quickly reminded himself of the constraints imposed by his position as a teacher within the academy. But as a teacher, I can't simply discipline a student without just cause. Even I would face repercussions. The junior class assessment is approaching in 7 days. You mentioned this troublemaker hasn't activated any chakras yet. I'll request to oversee the assessment as the chief examiner. If he fails to demonstrate any chakra activity, I'll have grounds to expel him according to academy regulations. Once he's out of here and on his way home, that's when we'll make our move. We'll reclaim the token and deal with him as we see fit. His lips curled into a sinister smile as he plotted their next steps. 7 more days of waiting? Lan Fei sighed in frustration. Every time I recall the shame he caused me, I wish I could exact revenge on him immediately. I swear, I'll make him regret ever crossing me. Wang Feng, unimpressed by Lan Fei's impulsive outburst, retorted with a hint of disdain. If you can't endure this minor setback, how do you expect to accomplish anything significant? I'm genuinely concerned for my sister. You're leagues behind Lan Xian. His words dripped with coldness, emphasizing his disappointment in Lan Fei's lack of composure compared to her sibling. Lan Fei's face turned pale, his knuckles white as he clenched his fists so tight that his nails dug into his flesh. The pain was a mere distraction from the rage boiling inside him. All right, I'll follow what you said, uncle. His voice trembled with a mix of fear and determination. But Yunxiao is not going to have an easy time during this period. I have a way to make him lose all standing and reputation, but I need your help, uncle. Wang Feng looked at his nephew with a flicker of doubt in his eyes. What do you plan to do? He asked, curiosity and skepticism warring within him. Lan Fei leaned in close, a venomous smile creeping across his face as he whispered his plan into his uncle's ear. Each word dripped with malice and cunning, painting a picture of deception and ruin for Yunxiao. As Wang Feng listened, his eyes widened in surprise, and then a slow, sinister smile spread across his face. When Lan Fei finished, there was a brief silence before Wang Feng burst into laughter. Excellent. Go ahead and do it. If it works out, we won't have to wait for 7 days. You're indeed my sister's son. I've underestimated you earlier. The moon hung high in the sky, casting a pale glow over Yunxiao's dormitory. Inside, Yunxiao sat cross-legged, deeply immersed in cultivating the great expansion divine technique. His mind was serene, and his divine sense, far superior to that of ordinary people, spread out like an invisible net. Suddenly, his brows furrowed. Who's sneaking around? He muttered, sensing the presence of 2 men lurking outside. Their stealth might fool ordinary people, but to Yunxiao, their presence was as clear as day. Could they be thieves? He pondered. With a fluid motion, he stood up and moved towards the door. As he pushed it open, something pink fluttered down, landing softly at his feet. He picked it up, frowning slightly as he examined the pink envelope. To Yunxiao was written on the front in beautiful, elegant strokes, and a faint, sweet fragrance wafted from the paper. Curiosity piqued. Yunxiao ripped open the envelope. Inside was a love letter, but it contained only 4 lines of a poem, each word carefully chosen, evoking a sense of longing and admiration. Yunxiao's eyes narrowed slightly as he read the lines, and a proud figure flashed through his mind. He couldn't help but smile. Maple Grove, he murmured, already setting off in that direction, his mind racing with thoughts of who might have sent the letter. Moments after Yunxiao left, 2 shadowy figures appeared in front of his dormitory. They moved with practiced silence, each step calculated. One of them, a slender man with nimble fingers, quietly took out a key. After a few tries, he managed to unlock the door. They slipped inside, their movements quick and efficient. After a few minutes, they emerged, carefully locking the door behind them. Their hands were empty, carrying nothing that would suggest they were thieves. Moments later, Yunxiao reappeared at his dormitory door, his eyes narrowing as he recognized the 2 figures sneaking away. They were lackeys of Lan Fei, ones he had encountered before. With a sneer curling his lips, Yunxiao pushed open the door and scanned his room. He soon found something under the blanket in his bedroom that rendered him speechless. A pile of colorful and fragrant women's undergarments and underpants. Well, Lan Fei, he muttered, his mind quickly piecing together the plot. It was a clear attempt to frame him, to sully his reputation with a scandal. "Since you want to play dirty," he said coldly, "I'll play with you." His eyes gleamed with determination as he quickly disappeared from the room, setting his own plan into motion. An hour later, Yunxiao's figure could be seen speeding toward Maple Grove. This vast area, covering hundreds of acres, was one of the most beautiful landscapes in Jialan Academy. By day, it was a place of cultivation and learning, but by night, it transformed into a sanctuary for secret trysts. Tonight, the moonless, windy, and cool season made it the perfect cover for hidden activities. As Yunxiao stepped into the grove, he extended his divine sense, detecting more than 30 pairs of men and women scattered throughout the area. Their whispers and barely audible noises filled the night air, but Yunxiao paid them no mind. Suddenly, a faint cry for help pierced the night. The voice was soft but reached Yunxiao's ears with clarity. Under the dim moonlight, he saw a young girl with a veil draped over her body, her face a mask of terror. Her clothes were torn, revealing patches of her fair skin, and her eyes were wide with fear, evoking a deep sense of pity and urgency in Yunxiao's heart. "Stop there, you little. It's your blessing to have been chosen by me," a gorgeously dressed man shouted as he rushed from the grove, his face twisted with anger and ferocity. He reached out, attempting to grab the girl. The girl, her face full of desperation and hope, spotted Yunxiao and hurried towards him. "Help me, senior," she cried, her voice trembling with relief. She seemed ready to throw herself into his arms, seeing him as her savior. A sword flashed across the void and fell into Yunxiao's hand with a swift, fluid motion. Its tip pointed directly at the girl's throat. "Stop if you don't want to die." Yunxiao's cold voice sliced through the night air. The girl froze, her eyes widening in shock. The suddenness of his reaction left her momentarily speechless, but she quickly recovered, tears welling up in her eyes. "Help me, senior," she pleaded, her voice breaking. "Someone wants to molest me." Tears, as large and clear as pearls, rolled down her cheeks, making her look even more pitiable. "Please, if you will just save me once, I will do whatever you want me to do." Any young man witnessing such a scene might have felt a surge of chivalrous duty. But Yunxiao's face remained impassive, emotionless under the moonlight. The man, his face contorted with rage and desire, caught up with the girl. He grabbed her by the shoulder and yanked her hard, causing a ripping noise as the veil covering her figure was torn apart. Her exposed skin shone pale in the moonlight, and she cried out in distress, "Senior, please, help me." The man dragged her to the ground, her cries of anguish echoing through the grove. In that moment, his eyes flashed with a trace of confusion, as if he were battling some inner conflict. But the fierce, predatory look quickly returned, and he growled, "Get out of here now, boy. I'm about to do my thing. Help me, help me." The girl's distressing cries continued, each one more heartbreaking than the last. Yunxiao's eyes, which had been slightly closed, opened fully. A small smile played on his lips. "Don't worry, my dear," he said softly. "The rescue will come soon." Upon hearing Yunxiao's words, a glimmer of hope flickered in the girl's eyes. She hurriedly struggled to her feet and trotted straight to Yunxiao, not bothering to cover her exposed skin. The man's eyes also showed a trace of delight, but he kept up his fierce facade. "Boy, how dare you snatch this girl from me? Do you know who I am? I'm Lu Tian, the son of Lu Siki, the commander of the Imperial Guard." "Oh, so you're Lu Tian," Yunxiao said with a knowing smile. He then turned to the girl. "The rescue I mentioned is not me, but them." "Huh? Them?" Both the girl and Lu Tian were taken aback. Suddenly, a group of people rushed out of the woods, surrounding the trio. "Lu Tian," roared Chenjun, the leader of the group. "How could you do such a terrible thing? Teacher Feng, you saw what happened just now. This brat is simply an animal." Lu Tian's face paled as he realized the gravity of his situation. The mention of Teacher Feng made his legs weak. Under the moonlight, he saw a middle-aged man at the forefront, his hair bristling with rage. This was none other than Feng Buping, the dean of students, known as the god of slaughter, for his strict and merciless ways. Lu Tian cried out in fear, taking a few steps back before collapsing to the ground. "What's going on? How did this happen?" The girl, still bewildered, looked around in confusion. Even Lan Fei and his lackeys, hiding in the shadows and ready to jump out, were dumbfounded. Why was the dean here? "Lu Tian, you animal!" Feng Buping's voice thundered through the grove. In a flash, he was in front of Lu Yitian. A loud slapping sound echoed as Lu Yitian was sent flying, his scream of pain ringing out. The serene night in Maple Grove was suddenly shattered by Han Bai's loud roar, echoing through the trees. "We can't spare this animal. Let's beat him to death. Let's beat this rascal who tried to rape his junior to death." His words stirred the growing crowd, and more people began to converge on the scene. Chen Zhen led a dozen men towards where Lu Yitian had fallen, and soon the sound of fists meeting flesh and Lu Yitian's cries of pain filled the air. Feng Buping turned his attention to the girl. "Are you all right?" he asked gently. "What's your name? Why were you with this animal?" The girl, still in shock, struggled to find her voice. "My name is Mengwu." Yun Xiao stepped forward, his demeanor changing abruptly. He smiled warmly at Mengwu, but his actions betrayed a sinister intention. "Don't be afraid, my dear. Look, you are sweating all over with fright." He pulled her into his arms, holding her slender waist tightly with one hand, making it impossible for her to escape no matter how hard she struggled. His other hand began to wander, touching her abdomen. "You," Mengwu stammered, her face flushed with embarrassment and anger. She tried to push away from Yun Xiao, but his grip was unyielding. Her body blocked Feng Buping's view, and she was too terrified to shout out, resorting instead to desperate struggling. Yun Xiao's strength was overwhelming, and Mengwu soon found herself unable to escape. Tears welled up in her eyes, but this time they were genuine, and her body trembled with real fear and humiliation. Feng Buping, misinterpreting her distress, thought she was suffering from mental trauma. "Don't be afraid," he said kindly. "I'll certainly redress your grievance." Fortunately, Yun Xiao sent someone to inform me in time. Otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable. "Yun Xiao, you take care of Mengwu here. I'll go and take a look at that animal. Why is there no more sound? He couldn't have been killed by those people, could he?" Yun Xiao, enjoying the moment with Mengwu's tender body, smiled and said, "Go ahead, Teacher Feng. Mengwu is in good hands now." Mengwu shuddered, crying out in her heart, "Don't leave, Teacher Feng. Don't leave me here." But strangely enough, she couldn't make a sound and could only sob quietly. Feng Buping nodded and walked toward the commotion around Lu Yitian. A crowd had gathered, pointing and whispering among themselves. Meanwhile, hiding far away in the grove, Lan Fei and his men were at a loss. Apparently, Li Yunxiao is behind all this. Du Feng said angrily. "What now, boss? I suggest we rush out and save Yitian, or he'll be killed." "Save my A**s. Lan Fei slapped him on the head and growled, "You brainless pig. We'll be caught in the net if we walk out right now. There's nothing we can do but sacrifice Yitian. Anyway, with Feng Buping here, he's not going to die." His eyes nearly burst into flames as he turned to the other two men and asked, "Have you put everything in the right place?" The two teenagers who had sneaked into Yun Xiao's dormitory to hide the incriminating undergarments nodded in unison. "Yes, we've put everything under his blanket. You can count on us, boss." Lan Fei's eyes gleamed with a grim coldness. "Li Yunxiao, while you might have escaped this, let's see how you're going to deal with the next one." Yun Xiao casually glanced in the direction where Lan Fei had disappeared, the corners of his mouth curling into a knowing smile. At this moment, Mengwu had given up all resistance. Her body went limp, her sobs quieting as she resigned herself to her fate. Just then, a commanding voice rang out from afar. "Stop it!" Feng Buping's voice cut through the tension like a knife. Seeing the group approaching, Yun Xiao felt it would be inappropriate to continue taking advantage of Mengwu. He gently picked her up and whispered softly, "Don't be afraid. It's all right now. That rascal has been completely crippled." Mengwu, still clinging to Yun Xiao, was trembling with a mix of anger and helplessness. Her head was buried in his chest, tears soaking through his clothes. The weight of her humiliation and the chaos around her left her feeling utterly defeated. The crowd's gaze was heavy and judgmental, and she could only wrap her arms around Yun Xiao, feeling a deep sense of shame and resentment. Feng Buping approached with Lu Yitian, who was barely conscious. Lu Yitian's face was a mess of bruises, swollen and disfigured from the beating he had received. His once arrogant demeanor was replaced with the pathetic whimper of a broken man. Feng Buping's expression was serious as he declared, "He's crippled." Yun Xiao's eyes flickered with a mixture of curiosity and disdain as he surveyed Lu Yitian's battered form. He exchanged a glance with Han Bai, who was standing nearby. The unspoken communication between them was clear. Han Bai's brutality had left its mark, and Yun Xiao's response was one of cold amusement at the savagery displayed. Han Bai met Yunxiao's gaze with a fierce glare, as if to say, "This is what you wanted. Leave this place now, all of you." Feng Buping commanded with a voice that brooked no argument. His gaze swept over the crowd, a mixture of authority and frustration evident in his tone. "I'll report what happened here to the dean. Liu Yiqian brought this upon himself, and he can't blame anyone else." He turned to Yunxiao, his brow furrowing slightly. "It's not appropriate for you to be holding her like that. Do any of you know her?" The question hung in the air as Feng Buping scanned the group of onlookers. Many of them were students, including several girls who had been part of couples caught in the act. They shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact as the tension in the air grew palpable. Amidst the crowd, a girl named Lu Feifei spoke up with a mix of concern and recognition. "She's Mingwu. We are from the same dormitory." Feng Buping gave a curt nod, his expression softening as he addressed Yunxiao. "Great, you'll bring her back. Report to me at any time if there's anything." With that, Yunxiao reluctantly handed Mingwu over to Lu Feifei. He placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, his voice gentle. "Don't be afraid, my dear. You're safe now?" Mingwu's eyes, red and swollen from crying, flickered with a mixture of relief and confusion. Yunxiao's hand brushed against her arm as he draped his robe over her shoulders. To those watching, it seemed like a gesture of kindness and concern. The crowd, having witnessed Liu Yiqian's brutal comeuppance, believed Mingwu's distress was solely due to the earlier incident. Lu Feifei wrapped an arm around Mingwu, guiding her away from Yunxiao with a comforting smile. "Thank you, Yunxiao. We'll make sure she's taken care of." Yunxiao returned her smile with an air of nonchalance. "You don't need to thank me. It's only right to uphold justice when a junior is in trouble. Should you need anything, feel free to come to me." As the crowd began to disperse, the tension in the air began to lift. The couples who had been disrupted earlier, now realizing their moment had been ruined, started to leave Maple Grove in groups, their enthusiasm for their previous activities all but gone. Just as the crowd seemed to be settling, the sudden, discordant sounds of drums and gongs shattered the relative calm. The loud beats reverberated through the night, drawing the attention of everyone in the vicinity. The rhythm was erratic, an urgent call to attention. From the direction of the noise, a large group of students emerged, their faces set in anger and concern. Among them, at the forefront, was Lan Fei, his expression a storm of rage and urgency. The group included several girls, their faces flushed with indignation. Feng Buping's brows furrowed in confusion as he caught sight of Lan Fei leading the charge. He turned to Han Bai and Yunxiao, his voice low but edged with authority. "What's going on here?" Lan Fei, seeing Feng Buping, seized the opportunity to further stoke the fires of outrage. His voice was filled with feigned outrage and righteous fury. "Oh, Teacher Feng, you're here too? This is perfect. We've got a serious issue at the academy, a thief, an extremely perverted one. The underwear of many female students has been stolen." The revelation hit the crowd like a thunderclap. Gasps and murmurs spread rapidly. "What? Someone's stealing girls' underwear? Who is this pervert?" A wave of outrage swept through the gathered crowd, the anger palpable among the female students. They began to clamor and scold loudly, their voices mingling into a chaotic din. Feng Buping's stern expression revealed his growing frustration. As he scanned the crowd, his gaze landed on an unexpected figure. "Princess? You're here too?" Qin Ruxue, the princess, stood at the edge of the commotion, her face flushed with a mixture of embarrassment and fury. Her normally composed demeanor was marred by the distress of the situation. "I've also lost something. Teacher Feng, you must catch that perverted thief for us." The princess's outburst only fueled the fire of anger among the crowd. Murmurs of agreement and renewed demands for action echoed around Maple Grove. Lan Fei seized the opportunity to add fuel to the fire. His eyes gleamed with malicious satisfaction as he announced, "Someone saw that thief running in the direction of Maple Grove." His gaze shifted to Yunxiao, a thin smile curling at the corners of his lips. The malice in his eyes was unmistakable. "Haha, Li Yunxiao, you piece of trash, you're going to be finished." Lan Fei's mood was one of twisted delight as he anticipated Yunxiao's downfall. Yunxiao, ever the enigmatic figure, raised an eyebrow in feigned curiosity. "Many female students have lost their underwear, but what does this have to do with you, Lan Fei?" The question hung in the air, and a ripple of confusion spread among the female students. Why was Lan Fei, who usually carried himself with an air of aloofness and disdain, now so involved and eager to help? The inconsistency sparked their curiosity. Lan Fei was momentarily caught off guard, his confident facade faltering. He stammered. Before he could falter further, one of Lan Fei's lackeys stepped forward, trying to salvage the situation. Boss can no longer stand idly by and watch, so he came forth and led everyone to catch the thief. The crowd's suspicion shifted, but Lan Fei quickly regained his composure. Yes, yes. I brought everyone here to catch the thief. Someone saw the thief running in the direction of Maple Grove. He puffed out his chest and spoke with an air of responsibility. As a student of the academy, it is my duty and obligation to assist. Yun Xiao, ever perceptive, put on a mask of realization. Oh, I see. Can you please tell us who saw the thief running this way? As the tension in Maple Grove reached a boiling point, the smart lad named Meng Kuan stepped forward, his demeanor haughty and self-assured. He had been one of the two men who had sneaked into Yun Xiao's room earlier, and now he boldly declared, "It was me." Why? His arrogance was evident, especially as he addressed the gathered crowd. Despite his knowledge of Yun Xiao's formidable presence, Meng Kuan felt emboldened by Feng Buping's authority and the sheer number of people surrounding them. Yun Xiao, with an air of nonchalance, responded with a faint smile. No, I don't have any problem. I'm just curious. The thief stole girls' underwear, but you, as a man, were the first to discover it. Why? And since you saw the thief, why are you not leading the effort to catch him? Why leave it to your boss? Meng Kuan's confident facade faltered. The questions were sharp and probing, putting him on the spot. He found himself at a loss for words as the crowd's curious eyes bore into him. Sweat began to bead on his forehead, and he struggled to formulate a response. Lan Fei, sensing an opportunity to shift the focus, bellowed, "What are you doing, Li Yun Xiao? Are you trying to divert everyone's attention? It looks to me like you might be guilty." His voice carried a venomous edge, designed to sow further discord. The crowd murmured in agreement, their suspicion now falling heavily on Yun Xiao. Meng Kuan, quick to seize the opportunity to deflect suspicion from himself, chimed in, "Right? Now that boss mentions it, the thief's figure was very much like this guy." Yun Xiao's internal amusement was barely contained. He had expected this maneuver from Lan Fei, and it was playing out just as he had anticipated. He chuckled to himself, the sound barely audible. "Young Master Fei, why are you slandering me?" he asked with a leisurely tone, his eyes twinkling with amusement. Lan Fei's smile turned colder. "To prove your innocence, you should let us search your dorm. If you refuse, you will be the prime suspect in everyone's eyes." Yun Xiao's reaction was immediate and dismissive. "Why should I do as you say? Who do you think you are?" Lan Fei's demand was audacious, but Yun Xiao refused to be intimidated. His disdain was palpable, and his stance was one of defiance. The tension in the air grew thick as the crowd awaited Yun Xiao's response. At that moment, Qin Ruxue, who had been watching the scene unfold with increasing concern, spoke up. Her face flickered with realization as she addressed Meng Kuan directly. "I believe Yun Xiao wouldn't do something like that. Meng Kuan, did you really see the thief clearly?" As Meng Kuan stood before the gathered crowd, his confidence began to waver under the intense scrutiny of Qin Rushue's piercing gaze. The princess's eyes, filled with both anger and authority, were enough to chill him to the bone. He knew that lying to someone of her stature could have dire consequences. His own life, as well as his family's, could be at risk. His heart pounded furiously in his chest, and beads of cold sweat formed on his forehead. He could scarcely believe he had found himself in such a precarious situation. Yet, as Meng Kuan glanced sideways, he saw Lan Fei's ominous glare. The intimidation in Lan Fei's eyes was equally terrifying, and Meng Kuan felt trapped between the two forces. He was acutely aware that crossing Lan Fei could be just as dangerous, especially considering the animosity between him and Yun Xiao. With a sudden, frantic resolve, Meng Kuan blurted out, "Yes, I saw the thief clearly. It's Li Yun Xiao. I have no doubt about it." Lan Fei's mood soared as he heard Meng Kuan's accusation. A triumphant grin spread across his face, his earlier frustrations momentarily forgotten. He raised his voice in victory. "Ha ha, Li Yun Xiao, do you have anything else to say?" The satisfaction in Lan Fei's tone was unmistakable, and he relished the moment of seeming triumph. The crowd's murmur grew louder, the suspicion now firmly fixed on Yun Xiao. Lan Fei's eyes danced with a mixture of malice and glee, fully enjoying the spectacle. Yun Xiao, however, remained unperturbed. He nodded slightly to Feng Buping, his expression calm and composed. "Teacher Feng, you can search my dorm, but if my innocence is proven, I expect an answer from Lan Fei. Feng Buping had been observing the situation quietly, his silence indicative of his contemplation. He had sensed that something was amiss and was waiting for the right moment to intervene. Now, he turned his gaze toward Lan Fei, clearly seeking his input on the matter. Lan Fei, eager to assert his dominance, responded decisively, "No problem. If you can prove your innocence, I'll give you an answer." The firmness in Lan Fei's voice showed he was confident of his position, but there was a trace of unease as well. The unfolding drama was proving more complex than he had anticipated. Yun Xiao's calm demeanor, coupled with his willingness to submit to a search, did much to defuse the immediate tension. He looked to Feng Buping with an expression that suggested he trusted in the dean's fairness and impartiality. "In that case, I believe in Teacher Feng's fairness," Yun Xiao said with conviction. As the tension in the air began to settle, Rushue's face reflected deep worry. Her brows were furrowed, and her normally composed demeanor was marred by unease. She had witnessed the chaos and the accusations thrown at Yun Xiao, and was troubled by the possibility of an innocent man being unjustly punished. Yun Xiao, sensing the unease among the crowd and the skepticism directed toward him, decided to address the situation with boldness and conviction. He raised his voice, his tone filled with a fervent sincerity that resonated through the night air. "Don't worry, princess. There is a righteous spirit pervading the heaven and earth. I, Li Yunxiao, am open and above board, and I don't believe evil can prevail over good." His declaration was met with a wave of murmurings from the crowd. The intensity of his words and the earnestness in his voice began to sway the opinions of those around him. The female students, in particular, found themselves reassessing their views. A guilty person would hardly possess such a commanding and righteous demeanor. Behind the crowd, Manhwa stood, her anger simmering just below the surface. Her encounter with Yun Xiao had left her deeply disturbed, and she struggled with the conflicting emotions that churned inside her. Despite Yun Xiao's outward display of righteousness, Manhwa knew what she had experienced. Rushue ground her teeth and stamped her foot. Her instincts told her that something was terribly wrong, that the situation was not as clear-cut as it appeared. She was convinced that Yun Xiao's show of virtue was a smokescreen for more sinister motives. Her frustration grew as she felt powerless to act, caught in the web of intrigue that surrounded Yun Xiao. "You are a fool. There's something obviously odd about this, and I'm sure they're trying to frame you," she thought bitterly. In a flurry of murmurs, students quickly gathered around, their curiosity piqued. In minutes, over 100 people had amassed outside Yun Xiao's dorm. Teacher Wang, what are you doing here?" Yun Xiao's voice was cold as he glared at Wang Feng, who lounged nonchalantly by his dorm door. Wang Feng, still half asleep, replied lazily, "I heard about the thief causing a ruckus. Thought I'd check it out." "Oh, Director Feng, you're here too?" Feng Buping's expression darkened. Experience told him that something was amiss. Yun Xiao's lips curled into a smirk. "Oh, so you decided to show up at my dorm?" Meng Kuan mentioned the thief headed toward Maple Grove. "Teacher Wang, you must be incredibly perceptive to know we'd come here." "Impressive." His tone dripped with sarcasm. Feng Buping's face grew even colder. "Wang Feng, what's really going on here?" Wang Feng snorted, a smug grin on his face. "I'm here to catch the thief just like you. This pervert's a menace. Once we catch him, I say we expel him right away to prevent any more trouble." Feng Buping's eyes narrowed. "If anyone tries to frame a student unjustly, I'll make sure they face the consequences." His reputation as the god of slaughter wasn't just for his enforcement, but also his commitment to justice. Wang Feng's smile remained. "Fairness is key. Once we catch the thief with the stolen goods, I'll report straight to the dean." He knew that with the dean's backing, any complaints could be easily dismissed. Yun Xiao's expression grew serious. "Since even Teacher Wang is so committed to fairness, I'm at ease. Everyone, be my witnesses." He produced a key, unlocked his dorm door, and gestured grandly. "Feel free to search." Wang Feng's eyes narrowed as he sensed Yun Xiao's nonchalance. But when he noticed Lan Fei's confident demeanor, he felt reassured. "Search the room." "Meng Kuan, why don't you help search?" Meng Kuan put on an act, pretending to search the living room before heading to the bedroom. Feng Buping's stern gaze tracked him, his voice a low growl. "Anyone caught planting false evidence will be expelled immediately." "I'll go check too," Rushue declared angrily, trailing after Meng Kuan. She suspected a scheme and intended to intervene if necessary. Wang Feng's eyes gleamed coldly. "Since trust is in question, let's all go in together." He stepped out, following Rushue and ensuring that any manipulation would be immediately exposed. Since everyone's so eager to inspect my bedroom, let's all go in. Yun Xiao stood up, leading the way with a commanding stride. A dozen people surged after him, all converging on the bedroom. Meng Kuan's face went ashen as he turned the blankets in the room. His worst fear was realized. The undergarments he'd hidden were gone. He quickly understood why Yun Xiao seemed so calm. Lan Fei barged in with a sneer. Meng Kuan, search every corner. Miss nothing. Sweat pouring down his face, Meng Kuan stumbled over to Lan Fei and whispered urgently. What? Lan Fei's eyes widened with shock. His roar reverberated through the room, making everyone flinch. Meng Kuan's legs shook uncontrollably under Lan Fei's murderous gaze. Meng Kuan, why are you standing there? Didn't your master order you to search the room? Yun Xiao's voice was dripping with mockery. Wang Feng's eyes narrowed, catching the unsettling shift in the atmosphere. His disappointment was palpable as he announced coldly, this room is too small. There's nothing here. Li Yunxiao must be innocent. The thief is still at large. Feng Buping's gaze hardened as he scrutinized Yunxiao, his thoughts unreadable. Rushue sighed with relief, but felt a pang of frustration. He must have known this was a setup all along. I wasted my time worrying, she thought bitterly. Seeing that their scheme had unraveled, Wang Feng lost interest. Since Li Yunxiao is clear, let's disperse, he said dismissively. Leaving so soon? Yunxiao's voice was laced with sarcasm. Teacher Wang, you mentioned the thief is still out there. Don't you want to find them? Wang Feng's face was icy. The campus is vast, and with no witnesses or evidence, catching the thief now is nearly impossible. The academy will handle it. Yunxiao's smile was cold. Who said there's no witness? Meng Kuan claimed he saw the thief. Could he be lying? In that case, I have reason to suspect Lan Fei may be behind this. Lan Fei's anger flared. Li Yunxiao, stop throwing mud at me. Yunxiao's expression grew serious. The evidence clears me. Now it's your turn. I want to search your dorm. Lan Fei's face darkened, but he forced a sneer. Fine, search if you must. But remember, I'll deal with you later, Li Yunxiao. The crowd moved quickly to Lan Fei's dormitory, located nearby. Lan Fei flung open the door, his voice icy. Search all you want, but don't damage my possessions. I doubt you can afford them. Yunxiao's smile remained as he gestured. Qin Zhan and Han Bai rushed inside. Wang Feng's expression grew increasingly grim as he sensed something amiss. Moments later, Han Bai and Qin Zhan emerged, carrying a wooden chest. Young Master Yun, we can't open this chest. Lan Fei's frown deepened. That's my clothes chest. Only I have the key. He produced a golden key from his ring and unlocked the chest with a creak. The crowd gasped as the contents were revealed. Wang Feng's eyes widened in shock. This is a setup. He's finished. Lan Fei was stunned, his face pale. This can't be. I didn't do this. It's a frame-up, Li Yunxiao. You're framing me. Framing me? Yunxiao's smile was cool and measured. You just claimed this chest was yours and could only be opened with your key. Lan Fei's rage was palpable. His body shook with fury as he stammered, You. Rushue's face turned red with a mix of anger and embarrassment. Spotting her white underwear half exposed in the chest, she kicked Lan Fei. You sick freak. I'll have the dean expel you. Expel. Expel. The cries spread like wildfire among the girls, soon joined by the boys. The campus echoed with the chants of expel. As the crowd's anger reached a fever pitch, Chanjun, rummaging through the chest, suddenly exclaimed, Hey, why is there half a box of soap in here with the girls' underwear? Han Bai smirked. Haven't you heard the rumors? Lan Fei's a psycho who throws soap in the bathroom while boys are showering, making his lackeys pick them up. Ugh, that's disgusting. Many boys turned pale and started to vomit. The space around Lan Fei cleared as students hurried away in revulsion. Lan Fei was trembling, his rage turning into a stupor. He pointed a shaking finger at Yunxiao, but could not articulate his fury. Yunxiao's voice rang out, clear and authoritative. The truth is now evident. Lan Fei didn't just steal girls' undergarments. He also made male students pick up soap. He deserves severe punishment. But we must follow the academy's rules. Let Teacher Feng and Teacher Wang handle this properly. We want justice. Chun Jun's shout was taken up by the crowd, their voices rising in a unified demand for fairness. Feng Buping looked at Yunxiao with surprise. He hadn't anticipated this clever maneuver from someone he thought ineffectual. Rest assured, everyone, he declared, his tone firm. I will report this to the dean immediately. We will handle it with the seriousness it deserves. Rushua, seething with anger, added, if the academy doesn't expel him, we'll take this to the dean ourselves. If that fails, I'll involve my father. I won't let this perverted freak get away. Yes, irreconcilable, echoed the girls, their voices full of fury and resolve. Lan Fei, now frantic, grabbed Wang Feng's arm. Help me, uncle. Save me. Wang Feng shook off Lan Fei's grasp, his expression cold. A pig is still a pig, no matter how you clean it. I'm not getting involved. He turned his back on Lan Fei and left, not wanting to be dragged into the mess. Lan Fei collapsed on the ground, his face a mask of despair as he was bombarded with accusing stares. Shortly after, the academy's decision was announced. The evidence was irrefutable, and Lan Fei was expelled, with no chance of readmission. The next morning, Han Bai burst into Yun Xiao's dorm, his face a mix of excitement and apprehension. Young Master Yun, I've got 2 pieces of news, one good, one bad. Which do you want first? Yun Xiao was relaxed, leaning back comfortably. Let's hear the good news first. Han Bai grinned. You were right. Lan Fei's been expelled. Yun Xiao's smile widened. And the bad news? Han Bai's face fell. The chief examiner for this year's annual assessment is Lan Fei's uncle, Wang Feng. We're finished. None of us will pass. Yun Xiao's eyes narrowed with determination. Finished? If Wang Feng dares to be ignorant, I'll make sure he's out along with Lan Fei. Han Bai was taken aback. You're truly ruthless, young Master Yun. But be cautious. Wang Feng's a teacher, not just some student like Lan Fei. Yun Xiao's expression hardened. I don't care who he is, a 5-eyed cock or a 3-legged feline. What's Lan Xian up to these days? Han Bai's face paled. You've reminded me. Lan Xian's declared he'll avenge his brother. We're in serious trouble now. Yun Xiao's eyes sparkled with a hint of amusement. Oh, that's great news. His mind was already on Lan Xian's coveted 5-colored divine air stone. After dismissing Han Bai, Yun Xiao grabbed his heavy sword and set off for the gravity chamber. Meanwhile, on the 4th floor of the alchemist's tower, an intense examination was underway. Luo Yunshang stood amidst a tempest of heat, her gaze locked on a massive tomahawk floating before her. The weapon glowed a fiery red from the intense flames, radiating scorching heat that filled the room. Sweat dripped from Yunshang's brow as she endured the heat, while the seated examiners remained unaffected by the oppressive warmth, protected by an invisible barrier. With a decisive motion, Yunshang scattered a cloud of golden dust around the tomahawk. The golden dust sizzled upon contact, causing the weapon's color to intensify, yet it seemed to fluctuate ominously, emitting low, rumbling sounds. The temperature soared, and the examiners exchanged whispers, their eyes widening in surprise. Yunshang's eyes shone with determination despite her exhaustion. She formed intricate seals with her fingers, summoning streams of true flame that surged into the tomahawk. The weapon, previously unstable, began to stabilize, drawing in the golden dust with a powerful, magnetic pull. The room felt as if a mountain had descended upon them, the tomahawk now emanating an overwhelming, steady pressure. Condense. Yunshang's voice rang out, firm and commanding. Fall, she added, directing 2 beams of light from her fingertips into the weapon. The intense heat and weight of the tomahawk vanished as it swiftly shrank into a miniature axe, falling gently into her palm. With a joyful smile, Yunshang approached the seated masters and, with both hands, presented the mini-axe to the white-bearded Su Han. Master Su, please have a look. Su Han's eyes swept over the mini-axe, and he smiled warmly. No need for further examination. This sun-smashing axe has achieved the 1st tier of superior weapon. Yunshang, you've passed the assessment. Applause erupted from the other masters, their faces beaming with approval. Yunshang's joy was palpable. Thank you, Master Su, and all of you masters. Su Han's gaze softened. This is all you're doing. I'm just curious. How did you manage to melt karmit into red copper? You failed at this step in previous assessments. The other examiners looked on, intrigued, as Yunshang prepared to explain her breakthrough. Yunshang's mind flashed back to Yunxiao's face and his smooth, confident voice. Red copper is inherently metal, but it leans towards the fire element, giving it excellent melting ability for karmit. Many alchemists prefer karmit for upgrading red copper weapons. But add sky crystal sand into the mix, and everything changes. Sky crystal sand is water-based, neutralizing red copper's fire attributes. The more you add, the harder it becomes to melt karmit. The solution? Treat sky crystal sand as an impurity and use refinement essence to purge it. Su Han's eyes widened in realization. Such a simple solution. Your discovery showcases your extraordinary intelligence. The state of Tianshui gains a true alchemist today. I'll inform His Majesty at once. Expect another grand feast in your honor. Yunshang's cheeks flushed, accentuated by her sweat-soaked face from the intense effort. Master Su, please let His Majesty know I prefer to avoid such publicity. Yinlei, positioned behind Su Han, chuckled. This is a remarkable achievement. We must celebrate. Yunshang, you're the most gifted young alchemist in Tianshui. In just 3 years, His Majesty has honored you twice with feasts. Only Lord Yangdi before you has had such distinction. In Tianshui, anyone achieving first-tier alchemist status or entering the Three Powers realm received a royal feast. Yunshang had been honored 3 years ago for reaching Great Martial Master. Yunshang hurriedly replied, You flatter me, Master Yin. I'm just a lesser alchemist compared to Lord Yangdi. Su Han stroked his beard with a knowing smile. Modesty becomes you, but Lord Yangdi's success was partly due to his mentor, Lord Gu Feiyang, a 9th-tier alchemist. With a bit of luck and a great teacher, your future achievements might rival his. Yunshang was about to respond when Su Han raised a hand. Today, the Alchemist Association also has reason to celebrate. We've added 2 more first-tier alchemists. Both you and Jiarong are Tianshui's rising stars. Su Yuanxiao, another alchemist, suddenly interjected with a sneer, President Su, while Yunshang's achievement is commendable, Jiarong, if I'm not mistaken, he's deeply poisoned. A stunned silence fell over the room. Su Han's expression shifted to one of concern. What do you mean, Yuanxiao? Yunshang's eyes narrowed. Sensing the conversation was turning towards sensitive information, she decided to make a strategic exit. Master Su, I'll take my leave now. Su Han looked at her, puzzled. You're now a core member of the association. You have the right to know everything. Su Yuanxiao's eyes glinted coldly as he continued. Jiarong was found to have used Hell Windstone during his last assessment, a prohibited material. Gasps filled the room. The Hell Windstone was notorious among alchemists for its dangerous properties. Yinlei's face darkened as he spoke. Yuanxiao, be careful with your accusations. I know you've had conflicts with Jiarong, but this is a serious claim. Proof is needed before such accusations. I'm accusing him of nothing? Su Yuanxiao sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. The Hell Windstone's toxin has likely seeped into his marrow by now. I've investigated his recent purchases, antidotes, and he's been frantically trying to buy detoxing pills, the legendary 4th-grade alchemical pills that neutralize all toxins and are so rare they're practically priceless. 5 days ago, he was hoarding poisonous materials and hiding away. He's been trying to counteract the poison with poison, but the Hell Windstone's toxicity isn't so easily cured. Jiarong must be in a pitiful state by now. Su Han's expression darkened as he listened. Su Yuanxiao produced a sheet of paper and handed it to the group. Here's a detailed list of Jiarong's activities since his promotion. Take a look. The room buzzed with worry as everyone reviewed the list. It included even the specifics of Jiarong's meals. Su Han's voice cut through the tension. Zhang Cheng, bring Jiarong here immediately. Regardless of what he's doing, he must come at once. Su Han, as president of the Tianshui Alchemist Association and one of the 2 third-tier Grandmaster alchemists in Tianshui, commanded immense respect. His authority rivaled even the emperor's, alongside Zhang Qingfan, the chief alchemist of the imperial palace. Su Han's position was one of both power and honor, and he would not tolerate deception. A palpable tension hung in the air as everyone sensed the impending storm. Moments later, Jiarong entered the 4th floor of the Alchemist Tower, flanked by Jiang Cheng. He greeted Su Han with a nod and acknowledged the others. A subtle, almost imperceptible smile played at his lips as he looked at Su Yuanxiao. His gaze softened when he turned to Yunshang. Lord Yunshang, I've heard the news of your promotion to a first-tier alchemist. Truly impressive. Among the 5 commanders of the State Guardians, your strength is outstanding. Yunshang responded with a modest smile. You flatter me, Lord Jia. The other commanders' strengths surpass mine. I've merely been fortunate. Jiarong's lips curled into a confident smile. President Su, I was engrossed in my seclusion. What's the reason for this urgent summons? Are we celebrating Lord Yunshang's promotion? A flicker of doubt crossed Su Yuanxiao's eyes. He had expected Jiarong to look unwell, but his demeanor was surprisingly composed. Su Yuanxiao's face twisted into a sneer. You're quite the actor, Jiarong. Even now, you managed to put on a brave face. Su Han's expression hardened. He tossed the list onto the table with a flick of his wrist. Yuan Xiao alleges that you used the Hell Wind Stone during your last assessment. This list details his investigation. I need a clear explanation now. Jia Rong's eyes flared with anger as he read the list. This old fool actually sent someone to track my every move. His heart raced with a pang of fear. Thank the heavens young Master Yun cured me of the toxin and taught me a soul cultivation technique. Otherwise, I'd be ruined today. Gratitude towards Yun Xiao surged within him like a torrent. Su Yuan Xiao, you're the one who owes me an explanation. Jia Rong threw the list to the floor, his voice seething with fury. If I had used the Hell Wind Stone, it would be detectable. But if I didn't, I demand an explanation from this old codger. Su Han's gaze was resolute. We will get to the bottom of this. Now, Jia Rong, put out your hands and completely suppress your divine sense. We'll conduct a thorough examination of your physical condition. Su Yuanxiao's grin widened, revealing a sinister edge. You want answers from me? Let's see how you'll handle the truth when we uncover your deceit. Jia Rong's expression suddenly shifted to one of icy pride. I, Jia Rong, have nothing to hide. Examine me all you want. I'm ready. He rolled up his sleeves, revealing hands as fair and smooth as jade. A murmur of doubt rippled through the crowd. Jia Rong's hands, pristine and unblemished, belied Su Yuanxiao's accusations. Could it be that Su Yuanxiao had been mistaken? Su Yuanxiao's heart raced as he stared at Jia Rong's hands. How is this possible? How could he have neutralized the Hell Wind Stone's toxin? His eyes narrowed as he focused his divine sense, probing Jia Rong's body. I'll expose you, faker. Even if you've cured the toxin, your soul power should still reflect your true alchemical level. As almost everyone directed their divine sense into Jia Rong, his fearless demeanor remained unchanged. He regarded Su Yuanxiao with a cold, mocking gaze, as if watching a clown perform. Moments later, Su Han's face grew severe. Yuanxiao, it's time for you to explain yourself. Su Yuanxiao's face twisted in panic. This can't be right. He was poisoned by the Hell Wind Stone? I'm certain of it. His divine sense frantically scanned Jia Rong's body, his frustration mounting with each passing second. Hey, have you seen enough? Jia Rong's voice thundered through the room. A powerful surge of soul energy erupted from his mind, slamming into Su Yuanxiao's divine sense with a shockwave that distorted the air. Su Yuanxiao's eyes widened in shock as the force made him recoil, his divine sense frantically retreating. But Jia Rong's energy followed, invading his mind and causing his soul to shudder violently. Su Yuanxiao's face contorted in pain as he spat out a mouthful of blood. How is your soul power so formidable? He gasped, his voice trembling with fear. Jia Rong's lips curled into a cold, mocking smile. I'm a true alchemist. Naturally, my soul power far surpasses those of pretenders like you. Su Yuanxiao's rage flared, and he coughed up another spurt of blood. Fine, fine, fine. His repeated insistence seemed to drain the vitality from his eyes, leaving him looking frail and defeated, as if all his energy had been sapped. Su Han stared in stunned silence before letting out a heavy sigh. Yuanxiao, why put yourself through this torment? Su Yuanxiao's gaze became distant as he spoke in a quavering voice. President, I'm old and worn out. I request permission to retire and return to my hometown. I wish to spend my remaining days in peace. Please, grant me this request. Shock rippled through the room as Su Yuanxiao's divine sense shattered under the strain, causing his soul power to plummet to that of an apprentice alchemist. Even Jia Rong was momentarily taken aback, though his heart swelled with exhilaration and triumph. In just 5 days, Jia Rong's soul power had grown strong enough to inflict serious damage on Su Yuanxiao. Though Su Yuanxiao was a first-tier alchemist, his reputation had long been established, and his soul power had been stable within that tier. Jia Rong marveled at Yuanxiao's skill. Young Master Yun, who exactly are you? With such a profound technique, I'd gladly serve you for 50 years, or even 50 days. Su Han's expression softened with sympathy. With Su Yuanxiao's strength irrevocably diminished, and his advanced age making recovery unlikely, Su Han knew he could no longer serve in the Alchemists Association. Moreover, Su Yuanxiao's past actions had made him many enemies. Go home and recover, Su Han said gently. I'll inform His Majesty of the situation. Su Yuanxiao nodded, his voice barely a whisper. Thank you, President. Avoiding everyone's gaze, he shuffled away, his posture resigned and defeated. Su Han cleared his throat and addressed the assembly. Due to health reasons, Master Su has decided to retire and return to his birthplace. All grievances against him are hereby forgiven. No one is to disturb him. Jiarong, your advancement is truly impressive, Suhan remarked. I didn't expect your soul power to be so stable so soon after your promotion. Please assist me in presenting Yunshang with her alchemist badge. Jiarong accepted the task with a warm smile and led Yunshang through the necessary formalities. Master Jia, I have a bold request, Yunshang said, a sudden thought striking her. Jiarong's interest piqued, and he smiled politely. Oh, please, go ahead, Lord Yunshang. Yunshang took a deep breath. I have a student who, due to his unique physique, cannot practice martial arts. However, he has a strong passion for alchemy and has learned much on his own. I'm seeking a good teacher for him. I wonder if Master Jia would consider taking him on as a disciple. Jiarong's expression shifted to one of concern. A disciple? Lord Yunshang, you are already an accomplished alchemist with strength comparable to mine. Why not teach him yourself? Yunshang shook her head. His identity is quite special. As the commander of the state guardians, it would be inappropriate for me to become his teacher. To be honest, he is the eldest grandson of Duke Jinghua, the natural son of General Filong. Understanding dawned on Jiarong. I've heard of Duke Jinghua's grandson, a martial arts idiot, as the gossip goes. His reputation as a failure in the capital is well known. But considering his weak physical condition, excelling in alchemy might be challenging. Yunshang nodded. Yes, I'm aware. Yet, there is something unique about him. Even if he cannot become your personal disciple, I hope you could at least guide him to the point where he can become an apprentice alchemist. It's crucial for us to honor our commitment to Duke Jinghua. Jiarong's demeanor grew stern. Very well, I'll meet this student. He must undergo a soul power test. If he meets the standard for an apprentice alchemist, I'll consider taking him as my personal disciple. This concession is for your sake, Lord Yunshang. Relief and gratitude washed over Yunshang. Thank you, Master Jia. Your kindness is deeply appreciated. Jiarong nodded curtly. Arrange for the soul power test at your convenience. If he qualifies, he may become my disciple. If not, he will not have the chance to meet me. As Jiarong departed, Yunshang's mind raced. Master Jia is one of the youngest and most promising alchemists. Having him guide my student would not only repay a favor, but also reassure Duke Jinghua. I hope the boy's soul power is up to par. That's all I can do. 3 days later, the Academy's annual assessment was underway. The assessment marked the end of a grueling year and ushered in a 2-month holiday. Students who passed would advance to the intermediate class, while those who failed faced expulsion from the campus. Each year, many students from influential families were eliminated, while the less privileged students, driven by desperation, often succeeded. The assessment took place in the Academy's grandest structure, the martial arts arena. This iconic building, constructed under the aegis of former President Yang Di, was an architectural marvel. Spanning over 1,000 square meters, the arena was built from rare and precious ores, exuding an aura of grandeur and strength. Nearby stood the most striking monument on campus, the colossal statue of Gu Feiyang. The statue, with one hand resting on the hilt of his sword and a knowing smile on his lips, gazed out into the distance. It was sculpted by Yang Di 15 years ago, in honor of his revered teacher. Yunshao stood in a corner of the bustling arena, his gaze fixed on the imposing statue of Gu Feiyang. The weight of his past life seemed to press upon him, melding with his present self. A wry smile tugged at his lips as he muttered, "Well, Yang Di was quite the visionary." His expression, however, betrayed a flicker of disheartenment. 2 students ambled past him, casting sidelong glances before diving into conversation. "I can't believe you've condensed primordial chi and become a warrior in just a few months," one student said, his voice brimming with admiration. "Of course. It's all for the assessment. Warriors get to leap straight to the elite class in the intermediate grade," the other replied, clearly pleased with his progress. "Yeah, but I'm in trouble. I've only opened 2 chakras. Do you think I'll be kicked out? Don't sweat it. Even if you've only opened 1 chakra, you're set to advance. Look at that guy over there, the so-called young master of the Li family. He's toast. Are you sure the Li family's young master is going down?" "Absolutely. This is Jialan Academy. Even the emperor has to play by the rules here." Yunxiao's eyes darkened with irritation. He muttered a curse under his breath, but chose not to engage with the bystanders. He moved swiftly toward the arena, where a throng of students and spectators had gathered. Their excited chatter and pointed fingers directed at the examinees filled the air. "Why are you so late, young Master Yun?" Han Bai approached him, an edge of impatience in his voice. Yuan Shao frowned, surveying the crowd. Why are there so many people? Han Bai's gaze was cold. They're here to watch us. Our class has always been mocked as the trash-stricken class. Students from the poorer classes are here to see how many of us will fail. Over a dozen of our classmates have already given up and gone home. Yuan Xiao's eyes swept over the arena. It was clear that only a fraction of the original crowd remained. Many of the students from influential families had bright futures, regardless of their performance, while those from less fortunate backgrounds were eager to witness the downfall of their rivals. As the excited murmurs filled the air, Wang Feng's voice cut through the noise, commanding attention. The assessment is about to begin. If you're not here now, you're disqualified. Teacher Luo is in seclusion, so I'll be presiding over the assessment today. His eyes flashed with a hint of malice as he continued, this year, there's a new rule. In the past, passing required either opening chakras or delivering a punch with over 1,000 caddies of force. This time, you need to do both to pass. Fail either requirement and you're out. Wang Feng's gaze lingered on Yuan Shao. He knew Yuan Shao was likely capable of exceeding the 1,000 caddies mark, given his recent performance against Lan Fei. A glint of cold determination flashed in Yuan Xiao's eyes as he stood resolutely. Who wants to go first? Wang Feng's gaze swept the crowd, landing with palpable intensity on Yuan Shao. His eyes were sharp and assessing, clearly aiming to unsettle him. Shang Wanqing, Du Feng, and their cohort observed from the sidelines, their expressions tense. Since Lan Fei's expulsion, Shang Wanqing had taken over as their leader. Yet, Yuan Xiao's recent display of power had left them wary and reluctant to confront him. Yuan Xiao met their stares with a fierce glare. What are you staring at? Want me to make you regret it? He snapped, his voice edged with menace. He then pushed through the crowd, moving toward the center of the arena. Shang Wanqing and his group instantly averted their gazes, their fear palpable as they gritted their teeth, seething with silent anger. Yuan Shao turned to Wang Feng with a contemptuous smirk. You want us to show both open chakras and strength exceeding 1,000 caddies? Watch closely and learn something. With a cold, determined grin, Yuan Xiao's heart chakra began to glow with a vivid green light. As he advanced, the air around him shimmered with an ethereal brilliance. With each step, another chakra illuminated. First step, the root chakra flared. Second step, the sacral chakra burst. Third step, the solar plexus chakra glowed. Wang Feng's expression shifted from arrogance to disbelief. His eyes widened as Yuan Shao continued. Fourth step, the heart chakra ignited. Fifth step, the throat chakra blazed. Sixth step, the third eye chakra shone with an intense indigo. By the seventh step, the crown chakra erupted. A halo of 7 glowing dots encircled Yuan Xiao's head, bathing him in a spectrum of colors. The entire arena was awash in his radiant light, casting him in an almost divine aura. 7. He's opened all 7 chakras, gasped a spectator. This is unbelievable. I thought he was a lost cause. Another murmured, incredulous. A so-called loser now stands just 1 step away from the origin realm. Wang Feng's face was a picture of stunned disbelief. He had thought Yuan Xiao's defeat of Lan Fei was due to external aids or techniques of brute strength, dismissing the possibility of genuine skill. How could he have unblocked his meridians? Wang Feng muttered in shock. I remember the Li family hired a 4th-tier alchemist for him with no success. Yuan Xiao's friends and allies were ecstatic, their faces lighting up with joy. The murmurs of astonishment from the crowd grew louder. Watch closely. A punch with over 1,000 caddies of strength is nothing compared to this. Yuan Xiao declared confidently. Without warning, Yuan Xiao launched forward. The ground, paved with diamond-like rock, shattered explosively under his force, fissures spreading like spiderwebs. He pulled back, then swung his fist with lightning speed, striking the strength-measuring rock. Boom! A thunderous explosion echoed through the arena. The impact left a deep dent the size of a watermelon on the rock surface. The crowd fell into stunned silence, their eyes wide with disbelief. Impossible! Someone cried out. He left a mark on the ground and on the rock with his punch. Another exclaimed. I thought only a warrior could achieve such feats. That mark is enormous. Even a newly advanced warrior couldn't manage that, a spectator shouted. He must be using some sort of incredible martial technique. The arena was abuzz with disbelief, particularly among the students from the prestigious classes. Their eyes were wide with astonishment, as though they had never seen Yuan Shao before. Han Bai and Chen Zhan stood in stunned silence, their their faces reflecting the shock of witnessing Yunxiao's aura, illuminated by the 7 chakras, and his punch with over 1,000 caddies of force. Rushua's eyes sparkled with excitement as she shouted, "I can't believe you hid your strength so well, Li Yunxiao." The most perturbed figure in the arena, however, was Wang Feng. His face was a storm of fury as he silently cursed Lan Fei for failing to reveal Yunxiao's true capabilities. His pride was bruised, and his temper was fraying. Is everyone satisfied now? Yunxiao's voice was cold and commanding as he surveyed the crowd. Heads bowed under his piercing gaze. His eyes eventually locked onto Wang Feng's, a mocking smile playing on his lips. "Teacher Wang, I have pressing matters to attend to. I'll be leaving now." The words were a direct slap to Wang Feng's face, and the humiliation burned in his chest. Seething with anger, Wang Feng snapped, "Don't think this makes you special. This is merely the basics of martial arts." Yunxiao's contempt was palpable. He chuckled, turning on his heel and striding away with an air of superiority. Wang Feng's frustration boiled over. He channeled his primordial qi into his feet, causing the ground to shatter beneath him in a violent explosion of rocks and dust. As Yunxiao approached the edge of the arena, his laughter halted abruptly. Ahead of him stood a man clad in white, a self-satisfied smile on his face. "Allow me to introduce myself," the man said with a superior air. "I'm Lan Xian, a graduating student and the leader of the Xian gang." The mention of his name sent ripples of surprise through the gathered students. Lan Xian's imposing demeanor and air of authority were unmistakable. He expected Yunxiao to falter, but the response was less than he anticipated. Yunxiao's eyes narrowed in disdain as he observed Lan Xian. With a dismissive wave of his hand, he retorted, "Good dogs don't block the way." Lan Xian's face contorted with rage. The insult stung deeply, as no student had ever dared to address him so disrespectfully, especially in front of such a large crowd. "You dare speak to me like that?" Lan Xian's voice trembled with barely contained fury. "No student has ever talked to me in such a manner." Despite his boiling rage, Lan Xian struggled to regain his composure. His movements became stiffer, his expression more rigid. "I'm not here to bicker. I've come to address my useless brother." "Oh? A big dog has arrived after I've dealt with the little dog," Yunxiao quipped, his voice dripping with mockery. "Are all members of the Li family as uncultured as you?" Lan Xian snapped, his anger barely controlled. Yunxiao smirked. "Uncultured? After all the fighting and bloodshed, and me crippling your little brother, you come to lecture me? What are you if not a fool?" Lan Xian's patience snapped. "I've had enough of your insolence. I'll make you regret ever stepping foot here." "Now you're talking," Yunxiao said, his grin widening. "A ruffian will always be a ruffian. Why bother with pretense?" Lan Xian's face reddened with fury. "I'm not here to argue. I've come to deliver a challenge." With a dramatic flourish, Lan Xian produced a letter marked with a golden character 4, challenge. He threw it at Yunxiao with a flick of his wrist. Lan Xian raised his chin with a sneer. "It wasn't a big deal when my brother and you fought. It was just child's play. But my good-for-nothing brother caused an uproar and deserved to be expelled. As his elder brother, I can't ignore this. I'm here to teach you a lesson." Wang Feng's face turned a deep shade of red, his eyes blazing with fury. The news of Lan Fei's misdeeds had ruined Wang Feng's attempts to spin the story in his favor. He had tried to convince everyone that Yunxiao was the villain, but Lan Xian's admission made all those efforts futile. Lan Fei's chances of redemption were shattered, and Wang Feng's own reputation was in tatters. Lan Xian, meanwhile, was basking in the glory of his new standing. By defending his brother, he had not only solidified his position among his followers, but had also won favor within the Lan family. His reputation had soared, and he reveled in his double victory. Whispers spread like wildfire among the students. "So, it was Lan Fei who was in the wrong. I thought he was being framed." "I thought so too, but now even his elder brother admits it. It's unsettling to think about it." Lan Xian's grin widened. His eyes sparkled with triumph as he pointed a finger at Yunxiao. "You have 2 choices. Kneel here, swear never to harm my family, and bow whenever you see us. Or, fight me and face being utterly crippled, only to beg for my forgiveness afterward. Choose wisely. I suggest you take the first option. It's not easy to cultivate to your level." The crowd buzzed with anticipation. This is savage. If he chooses to kneel, how will he hold his head up in the future? Exactly. But if he refuses, fighting Lan Xian could be a death sentence. It's a choice between pride and survival. Rushua stormed forward, her face flushed with anger. Lan Xian, this is outrageous. You're a graduating student and a 9-star warrior, just a step away from becoming a martial master. Yet you're challenging someone who isn't even a warrior? Do you have no shame? Yun Xiao snorted. When the younger brother is a joke, the older brother isn't far behind. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And since when has the Lan family ever been known for its shame? Lan Xian's face reddened, but he soon burst into mocking laughter. If you're afraid to choose, just admit it. Why hide behind a woman's skirt? So, you're the esteemed grandson of Duke Jinghua, the firstborn of General Filong? Huh. Yun Xiao's eyes narrowed in contempt. With a swift motion, he spat a glob of phlegm at Lan Xian. The projectile flew with such force that it whistled through the air. Lan Xian's face twisted in rage, but he had to dodge the phlegm, stepping aside. With a sardonic smirk, Yun Xiao stepped forward and raised his middle finger. Even though you're disgraceful, I accept your challenge. 3 days from now, in this very arena, I'll beat you so badly that you'll be on your knees begging for mercy. And I'll make you lick my shoes. The crowd fell silent, stunned by Yun Xiao's audacious response. Han Bai and Chen Zhen, their faces pale with fear, hurried to stand by Yun Xiao's side. They urged him to reconsider, their concern evident. Lan Xian's face was twisted with rage as he watched Yun Xiao walk away. His voice was laced with venom as he shouted, "You better not back out. If you don't show up in 3 days, you'll have no place left at Jialan Academy." Yun Xiao turned back, a smirk playing on his lips. "Don't worry. I'll be here, and I won't be washing my feet for 3 days." Lan Xian's face flushed with fury, and he clenched his fists so tightly his knuckles turned white. "You're all talk. If I don't cripple you completely in 3 days, I'll eat my hat." As Yun Xiao walked away, his laughter echoed through the arena. Yun Xiao's smile faded, replaced by a cold, determined expression. As he strode away, his thoughts turned grim. The feud between the Li family and the Lan family runs deep. Lan Xian is just the beginning. I'll deal with him, and then I'll bring the entire Lan family to its knees.